Hey, welcome back to the Blue Collar Off-Road Podcast, episode 184. I'm Graham. I'm here with Luke, Cody, and Richie, and we have Carl Jantz. Jantz Engineering, Jantz Performance. Which
Jantz
one do you?
Engineering or
Jantz
Jantz
Engineering,
4x4.
Jantz 4x4. You guys have probably heard of this dude through, one realm or another, whether it be some pretty interesting axle. What would you call them? It's not really a modification. You're like
Improvements.
improvements for. I know you do a Dana 51 because I looked at that one when I had one.
I've got improvements for the Dana 60, which improves it to Dana 70, and the Dana 44s go up to Dana 50.
Yep, that's what it was.
And if there's anything I could do for a 30, I'd be a millionaire right now.
Honestly,
there's just not enough space in those things. Although we did talk to one guy who had he was shaving them. Chris Welch. He was doing some pretty interesting stuff. As far as
one of my load bolts.
Yep, Action Fab.
Yep. Anyways. He's the only guy I know who has done anything interesting Dana 30 wise. But
so, I was gonna ask, so how did you end up being the guy behind Jantz Engineering? What kind of rig do you have? How did you get to that point?
Oh God. Okay, so when I was growing up, my folks did a lot of hunting and out in the woods and whatnot. So time passes on. I'm in high school and I'm going hunting with my brothers, and hunting's fun, but sitting there, waiting for a duck to go by when your feet are freezing cold, or sitting on your ass on a hillside waiting for the elk to go by, it got boring. Not that I enjoy hunting, but I really enjoyed just getting there and back. Driving around. They had 4-wheel drives. My mom was always talking about their guides when they go off. We live in Washington. They go off to Wyoming or up the Yukon, and they 4-wheel drive forever into the backcountry. And she sent me pictures of the mountains they hiked on and the scenery they saw. And I just like being in the 4-wheel drive and bouncing across the creek or whatever, the mud hole, to get to the hunting spot. And it's always warmer in there. So I guess after high school and working my way through college, I had an old 64 Scout, and I just started learning how to maintain it and improve it. I figured out how to do a spring over, and oh boy, that was after the 6-inch long shackle lift.
Now, what year was this, though? Like, to put in perspective.
Yes, you got to go back. So I graduated in 78. And I had the Scouts since I was 14, because technically it was my brother's, but I bought it with money I'd saved off my paper route for a whole $400. And back in the day, Desert Dogs were the king tire, and I had to get them on there, so I had to lift it up. Doing the shackle lift fucked up the caster on the front end, and it did the death wobble, and I could go on for hours trying to shim it and get it right, and it'd be over a while, and the shims would work out, but I learned alignment, and eventually I did the leaf spring flip, and thought that was pretty cool. And I mean, for a rig that Walla Walla is 4 miles across and the mountains are 10 miles from that, we didn't trailer anything to the woods that back then, but when you didn't have to drive that far, it didn't matter if it handled all over the place. My steering wheel literally had this much slop in it, and I just thought that was normal.
It sounds normal to me.
One day it got so bad it had like this much slop in it. And somebody goes, well, why don't you go up to International Harvester and buy a rebuild kit for it? Well, they got those? I didn't know, right? So I was like $24, $30. It wasn't a lot. And it had some little bearings and some bushings and seals. And it had this little cone thing. And I couldn't figure out where that cone thing went. But in those steering boxes, you got a worm gear, and as the worm gear goes back and forth, this little pin, this little pin follows the worm gear back and forth. Here, I'll do some knuckles here. It kind of goes back and forth, and that's what steers. Like cone, the cone's supposed to be on a pin. There was no cone in the box. So knocking back and forth through the gears, and I'd crank the adjustment down so far, you got to adjust it on the top, right? I was, and it's a half nut, and I was using a quarter of a half nut, and I knew if I screwed it any farther down, the nut was going to fall off. And I put it all together, and I don't have but this much slop. And I was like, whoa, it's so hot.
That's incredible. So then, go ahead. Luke.
No. You go ahead, Cody.
So then, okay, so then you had the Scout. Now,
Yeah.
what was kind of the next step for you? Around what age were you like, all right, the Scout's not the answer, or has the Scout kind of been around for much longer than I'm expecting?
Well, okay, so I'm 14 years old. I got to wait 2 years to drive the Scout, and so I drive it a year in high school, and then high school graduation, I got a '72 Ford Bronco. So that would have been, got it about spring of '78.
Oh, so that's like a new car at that point.
Yeah, '78. I was only 6 years old. That thing was great. I had lots of power and drove, but we had to get tires on that, and those tires were just coming. I mean, literally, back in that day, there was still an argument between a tall, skinny tire and a wide, flat tire. And a tall, skinny tire was 31 inches tall, and the wide tire was 30 inches tall. When you're going on a 750 16 or 1100. Woo!
And it's just wild at this point that like we've got small tires being on 40s compared to going to the off-road park now where everyone's running 43 14.5s.
Or did you
I'm
see
running 46s, and I've gone on runs where I have the smallest tire.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus.
Jeez. Well, like if you look at what's his name there, that guy from upstate New York who had the
Unimark?
Yeah, now he's got the 50-inch megas on his rig. Like, what the fuck? Who 50s? Come on now. We're just getting absurd. At what when is the stop? Right? Like, at what point is it just like, all right, maybe this tire's a little too big? Crazy.
When we're bolting MRAP axles under XJs, I think that'll be the point that it'll stop.
They either stop at a budget point or a woman problem.
Yeah.
I can't argue that. So, this Bronco, right? Did you go for the wide tires or did you go for the tall skinnies?
Well, I started with the tall skinnies because that's all I could get. 750 mudlugs, and if you put tubes in them, you could run down to 8 psi, brother. Don't go to 6, or you'll spin the rims and rip the stems out of the tubes. And then from there, I think I came up with they had some 31 or 32 inch. God, if everybody remembers True Tracks, it's like a
No.
True Tracks on there. Yeah. How about Desert Dogs?
Nope.
How was the deal back in the day? True Tracks versus Desert Dogs. It's like,
So, for reference, I think the oldest person on the podcast is about to be 29. So we're a bunch of young guns.
all right. Well, let me step up a little bit because people were getting bigger tires. One of my buddies got a set of 34 Gumbo Monster Mutters on his Jeep.
I know about gumbos.
Right, the Gumbos. And he had 38s, and Les Schwab had easy payment plans, and I got 36-inch Grand Prix four-wheelers. And they were, instead of a Gumbo that's unidirectional, they were more directional.
Similar to like a groundhog.
Yeah, but they had a double Z in the middle. Rode good. I'd ride them down the highway, but then obviously, I'd got the truck 4-speed in. I figured that out, reading Four Wheeler magazine, and I bought a $700 Ford pickup, and I took the 4-speed out of it, and I put a $35 4-speed car transmission in it. So I had a free tranny to put in there, but I had to spend $400 on the adapter for an advanced adapter, and luckily that was all figured out. I didn't have to change driveline lengths or anything; just bolted in and heat up the shifter and bend it 50 times under the dashboard so you could grab the gear. And having granny gears was, my God, you were God. And so then it was, well, what size tire? And then I learned to do gear ratios. I got a set of 4, 5, 6 gears in there, and they seemed pretty. In fact, my speedometer was right on, because I went from 350 to 4, 5, 6s. I went from a stock 29 tire to a 36-inch tire. The speedometer was right on. And I cruised back and forth between wall to wall and going to college. And I'd come home every other weekend to visit my girlfriend flying at 100 miles an hour. Oh, yeah. I knew all the back roads through the wheat fields and whatnot. And, I wasn't great at setting up ringing pinions, and I went through a lot. That's kind of how I got there, is I just kept breaking parts and learning as I was going. And, I probably broke over 25 axles in front of that Bronco.
Ring and pinion specifically, or just like in total?
And for the Bronco, ring and pinions, at least 8 ring and pinions out of the Bronco, but that includes back when I put in on the 44-inch Gumbo Monster mutters, and I went down to 589 gears, and on the 589 gears on the pinion, it's so tiny, I was breaking 2 of those a year. And then I switched up to 538s because you get a little bit more pinion. And back then, nobody wanted 538s. It was the gas crunch, right? So you could go to a wrecking yard and you could get 538s out of an old Jeep for $40.
Damn.
Now, what came with a 538 from the factory?
Your basic 40 through early 40 through late 50 CJ5s, or 2As and 3As. They had,
I did not know that.
48, yeah, right from the stock. That's what they had.
Huh.
They didn't start doing 411s till the early 70s. So you could, and if you wanted a posi for the front end, you went and got you an old Studebaker rear end and took the posi out of that, put in the front of your Jeep.
See, I love that.
Studebaker used a Model 27 and a Jeep out of 27 front and either a 41 or a 44 rear.
Mm-hmm.
See, I love hearing about stuff like this, because this kind of like brings it into like where I came into wheeling, and like talking with Luke, or like looking on forums and things like that, and finding out all the different parts from other vehicles that you can just like flip and flop it. It's so sick to find out like this wasn't like a current generation thing. Like, it's like back when you were out there making this shit happen. Like, it's really cool to hear, and like it's awesome to experience the far end of it too. That's so cool.
Well, we'd find stuff, and we didn't know that there was a high speed and a low speed carrier, and we'd wind up with the wrong one and
wonder why your pattern looks like crap and you can't get it.
We figured it out. I mean, you can take a 27 high speed carrier and put it in a 25 low speed front end. If you use the bearings from one off the other, they're the same taper. They're a different series, but the taper's the same. So you put this big fat race on one side, this little narrow race on the other side. But now the carrier is so far over that your axle, because they had double side gears on each side, they realize we're talking about 3/8 of an inch for each side gear on each side. So 3/4 inch engagement. Well, now you shift this over to one side, so your inner side gear has just got a little bit of the tits. But then somebody figured, well, if you use a Scout short side, it's about a 1/2 inch longer, and then you get both sides. And it just, we shared information and stumbled across shit.
And it's funny hearing you talk about the old Bronco and doing this kind of shit to it, because like I had a what the fuck was it? It was a 70. No, was not a 78. It was an early Bronco, not a big Bronco. 76, because it had discs. So being what I was, broke teenager in high school,
Right.
and we're figuring this out. That axle earned a special place of hatred in my heart. I went through like 8 sets of chromoly, or what was it? I went through like 3 stubs, chromoly inners, 8 sets of Warren hubs, because I bought the Warren
my
premiums because that's what the forum said was the best thing out there at that point in time. This is like 2012, 2015 was that axle's reign of terror, and it had a Detroit locker in there because that was the best possible thing. And this axle had been together forever. It could not stay together. So I'm like figuring out that yes, you can in fact take 78 Bronco parts and put them on a 76 axle. However, you have to use that hub. Okay, cool. Well, now I want to put an Isuzu
Right,
Trooper
that
rear.
got you the bigger U-joint on the axle knuckle.
Yep.
I
Okay.
learned that from a Chevy guy. I looked at why is a Dana 44 in a Chevy got a bigger U-joint than a Dana 44 in a Ford? Like, and
Yep.
then once you got a degree and you do some math, you realize that if you increase the cross size by an 1/8 inch, doesn't seem like much. Like if you got a 2-inch axle and you go to 2 1/8, you're not gaining much. But if you got a 1/2 inch cross section on a U-joint, a 1/2 inch, and you go to 5/8 cross section, that's 50% stronger. And that's huge
Yeah.
numbers, right? So you went through that conversion, and I'm gonna guess then you broke something else.
No, I decided to put an Isuzu Trooper rear axle in because it had 456 gears in it, and I had 456s up front. And
Okay.
it's kind of like a big Toyota rear axle. Picture a Toyota rear axle scaled up.
Apart.
Exactly. So then you know what I'm talking about perfectly.
They're heavy duty.
Very heavy
You can't
duty.
find anything for them.
No, but in stock form, they're ridiculously strong. So
Right.
I've got a set of 10-bolt spindles. I'm not going to put 10-bolt knuckles on this thing because that means I have to take ball joints apart, and I'm fucking lazy. So, being a tool and die maker apprentice, I'm like, what's the big deal here? I'm just going to make up some spacers, and we're going to run this thing with 10-bolt bearings in there. And that all worked out really well.
10-bolt Isuzu or 10-bolt Chevy?
10-bolt Chevy to get the 6-lug conversion onto the Bronco 44.
Okay. Yep.
And that all ended up working out until I ran into some issues with. I was living in Connecticut at the time, and they didn't take too kindly to 17 through 21-year-old Luke's version of frame repairs. They thought that was subpar, and there was lessons learned, but I stacked so much 1/4-inch plate where the rear shocks were going that there was a solid 3/4 bar trying to get them to stop ripping, and the cops did not find that to be appropriate for going down the road. So that Jeep died, and it eventually led to the Jeep that's on my Facebook page through a series of twisting events.
I'm gonna throw one more Scout story out there.
Lay it on us.
So the power locks that Spicer used in their, everything from 27s up to Dana 80s. Well, no, the Dana 60s. You got a 2-pace case, and there's clutches on each side of it. And and I always hated Scouts came advertised as all-wheel drive. Yet you could still slip a tire, and I always hated that. And we're I grew up in a little podunk town of Walla Walla, and we heard the big town of Portland, Oregon. That was a day drive. There was a place over there, and they would shim up your power lock about 800 foot-pounds for it to slip. Well, I'm in the power lock in the basement chewing out pieces of an axle that I'd broke. And I'm looking at all this thing, and I thought, I'd heard the story because some older guy had got it done, and it worked real good for him. And I guess I had an innate sense if you shim it too much, it's going to be too much. And if you don't shim it enough, and I thought, you know what? I got some coffee can lids here. But back when coffee came in cans,
It still does.
A couple shims that put two on. I put one on each side, and I put the axles in there, and I could still twist them a little bit. So I put two on each side, and I just got lucky. That thing would still go around a corner without squeaking the tires. But if you had one tire in gravel or mud and the other on pavement, you'd spin them both.
That's awesome.
And then literally a month ago, I had a tractor puller guy, and these guys have so much weight on their front ends that you can lift the back bumper up on the four-wheel drives. And they have to have the power locks because there's double the spider gears in there to keep from breaking. And they want the posi, but they don't want too much posi.
Huh.
And this guy, he sent me his Dana 60 that he'd played around with shims behind it, And I did a 70 for him, and he says, match the 70 to the 60. So there I was. I wasn't cutting coffee can lids, but I had some shim stock, and away I went with the tin snip. Still, I got it about 175 pounds of slip, enough to keep them spinning when they equal weight on them, but not enough to. Says what happens if one tire grabs harder than the other, that's when they break.
Mm-hmm.
Will it also kick the truck around? I would think it would kick the truck around.
So they want a little slip, but not too much. So
I'm kind of surprised.
Learn in the basement, we're still carrying through.
So the sled pulling guys don't actually just like slap a Detroit in there and have them both just completely locked and go?
Well, that's what I would think. But okay, let's go back. There's so much weight on the front end that you can lift the back bumper up. Okay? How are you going to steer when you get to the end of the track?
Touche. Well played. I can't argue it.
Wait,
I don't know why they don't just put RAM assist on there. Maybe some of them have it, but that's the way it is.
Because I remember my first introduction to full hydro was at the Scheid Diesel Nationals in 2010, I want to say. Because the super modifieds were just starting to run those PSC weird rams, and I asked my dad what that was, and he goes, "That's a hydraulic cylinder, like what I'm putting onto helicopters." And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. What do I know? I'm like, 12 at this point, or what would that be? 2010? Yeah, I'm 15 at this point.
You were asking your dad about steering stuff, and I was at motocross races staring at the monster girls. We were not the same.
Please be patient. I have autism.
It's funny because I remember seeing something the other day about it, and like there was like this inside joke between me and my dad because my dad like nudged me and was like, "Oh, look at the girl in the pink boots," and I thought he said, "Hey, look at the girl with the big boobs," and I go, "Did you say big boobs or pink boots?" And like for the rest of like ever, like I'm 27 now, and I'll still be like, "Oh, pink boots," and like it's just a thing now. So it's funny that just made me think of that.
Next thing you're gonna be wanting is 2 tickets to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 tickets to Pittsburgh.
So back in the day when you guys were doing all of this stuff, and I apologize, I do not mean anything by disrespect when I say back in the day. So I just, just for just to put it out there. But how was a lot of this information like transferred between people? Was it a lot of like word of mouth, or like how?
Well,
was it magazines?
There was 4-wheel drive clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And our social media was to meet at the grocery store at the east end of town every Saturday at 9 a.m. And then whoever showed up, you went wheeling with. And then there was a club in town, the 5.4 wheelers, and they had like 25 or 30 members, and they did sand drags and mud runs and all kinds of stuff. And I never was a member of the club because about the time I was getting old enough to do that, it was kind of falling apart, so to say. But just we had the talk, and man, every issue of 4-Wheeler magazine, you sat down, you got it, you sat down on the toilet and read it till your ass went numb. You couldn't stop. And then you'd be looking in the back to see what the biggest tires and how much they cost, and you couldn't afford that stuff, and we figured out how somehow.
So, on the note of bigger tires, how was it watching the progression from, the 31s to now you've got guys running, like you were saying, you've got 46s?
So, like I said, my first guy in town with 38s, everybody said they're too big, everything's going to break. And he had them on a CJ5.
Oh God, 38s on a CJ5 sounds crazy.
Yeah, with a spring over, and it was top heavy and tippy, and then the cop hassled him, and so then he did a spring under with a ton of springs, so it just basically didn't have any flex, you know.
It's just a
We're
brick.
mostly snow wheeling, and then then somebody else got 40s, and I saw 40s on a Bronco, and then they came out with the 44 Gombo Monster Mutters. And I had to have them. I saved up my money from Wheat Harvest, and I ordered those things. And then the rims you see on Super Jeep now are the same rims. I modified them to beadlocks.
Wow.
Yeah, so I bought those at about 1980, and we had the whole neighborhood gathered around watch. You couldn't jack up one side of the Bronco or the other to get the tires on because it'd tip over. Put a high lift jack right in the middle of the front bumper, and then have people on each side to keep it from tipping while we put the tires on. I'd gone. While I was waiting to get them, I built the 3-inch body lift out of just square 3-inch box tube. I already had a 3-inch suspension, made out of lift blocks in the back, and the front coil springs were just. We figured out if you use F-150 coil springs on a Bronco, you got about 1.5 inch lift, and underneath that, I had a couple little square blocks where the spring bucket goes on, and that of course throws your caster off on your front A-arm. So I got some. Now you just buy those brackets from Duff or Tom's Bronco Supply, but I got some 4-inch angle iron, and my arms were like that, and I welded that angle iron on underneath the bottom of the other mounts and cut a hole in it, and next thing you know, my alignment's correct. I didn't like how it tipped. I got some anti-sway bars. My 72 Bronco I could slide sideways on pavement with 44s. It handled well. I worked at it. Dual shocks of the day, Rancho, RS 5000s, all over. So in fact, big tire progression, Interco Swamper used my Jeep because I was the first guy in the United States to put a set of 44s on a flat fender. And if you happen to have a copy of like the Jeep Owner's Bible or the Chevy Owner's Bible, there was a series done by Moses Ludell. It had like the Dodge Owner's Bible. You go to the tire section, you'll see old Flatbad there. It's a black and white picture. I had 14 wide rims and 44-inch TSLs on it. And
that's cool.
I'd got a hold of some mining axles when the big mine over in Kellogg, Idaho went down. They had these mine carts, and they were a little bit narrower, and they had 589 gears in them. And then I converted them to 5-lug, and that's what my first axles were. Dana 60 with 589s.
Oh.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. It worked. They worked pretty good. And I also have run 717s, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
What
is it? Freiberger in that Toyota he calls Clampy, I think.
No, that's Fred.
Fred, I'm sorry. But Fred has those in his rig.
Who the fuck is Fred? Who's Fred?
Fred from, I think it's Dirt Every Day, and that Clampy
Okay.
Toyota.
Gotcha. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yeah.
You were
Fred
saying
Williams.
it like I was supposed to just know who Fred was. I'm sorry.
Well,
Keep
he
going.
used to be an editor on 4-Wheeler magazine. Everybody knows.
Come on.
Well, now I do. I just didn't know if it was supposed to be like
now
a
you
friend
do,
of ours.
after we
or
told you.
something. Like, I don't know.
But yeah, we've heard of that. That's a deep gear ratio, and I've always wondered if that deep of a gear ratio would cause issues, even with like a Dana 70 size pinion.
Now, hang on a second here.
Oh, he's got one.
Show
Of
and
course he
tell.
does.
I've got
For
a
the list,
538. So here's a 538,
Mhm.
and you can see how the gear tooth is close to the bearing.
yep.
When they cut the 717s, there's actually nicks right here in the bearing surface. The pinion is that small.
Oh
So-
wow.
So that's significantly smaller.
Significantly smaller. And I can assure you, before dual transfer cases, that was the only way to get the gears low enough.
Mhm.
You know, we were taking gears out for a Bronco transfer case. You'd take some gears out of a Bronco case and some out of a Jeep case, and you could get a 2.5 to 1 low range in your Bronco or your early Jeep case or your 18. That's how we did it. And then you'd run the truck 4-speed, and you had tons of torque multiplication. And if you had a small block Ford or Chevy that wasn't hopped up, they did pretty good. But once we start building more horsepower, I could eat a set of 17s up about twice a year, just 4-wheeling. And for competition, forget it. And so then I went up to the 589s, which I'm still running now. And I get about 4 years out of them. They don't last forever. And that's in a Dana 70. So your dividing line, you know, if you got 373s, your pinion's this big around, right?
What would you say in inches? About 4 inches, 5 inches of diameter?
So we got about 2.5 on these 538s right here. You go 373, you got about a 4-inch pinion. And you've got a lot more gear teeth in mesh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what happens if let's say you're running 410s, what you do is you throw drive lines. You got enough horsepower.
Mhm.
Yep.
And so as your gear ratio gets higher, your pinion gets smaller and weaker. Okay.
Mhm.
And the dividing line there is probably about a 488. And 538 works good. So that there was a guy did a study. Dana 30 with 373s is close to the strength of the Dana 70 with 717s.
What?
You know what though?
If you're trying to put 6,000 pounds of torque into a shaft to get it to move, if you're running 373s, you have to put so much torque into the 373s, you bust your pinion off.
Mhm.
So there's a balance there besides just going larger altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say the sweet spot, regardless whether it's a Dana 30 or a Toyota 8-bolt or Chevy, whatever, I say 488 is about your balance. 488 and down numerically, you'll generally throw a driveline or break a pinion tooth. And then 488 and up numerically, that's when you start breaking the pinion teeth and the ring gear looks, pardon me, I said that wrong. You'll throw a driveline or you'll break ring gear teeth with the higher ratio numerically.
Mhm.
And you will break pinion teeth with the higher gear ratio numerically. Did I mix that up? Did I
No.
do it again?
I mean, I'm tracking. So if you
Okay,
got
so as your
538s, you're more
pinion gets
likely to.
smaller, you're
Yep.
going to break pinion teeth. Okay, as your pinion gets larger, you're either going to throw a drive line, break an input shaft, or break ring gear teeth. Okay,
Mhm.
and the sweet spot's about a 488. And so the nice thing now with dual transfer cases, you can do that. Although since I'm a snow wheeler, I'm not a rock bouncer. I run the dual transfer cases and the 589s. I don't run 717s. They just crumble. But I've got quite a few customers running dual and triple transfer cases on their Toyotas, and they just got 4-bangers in them, and they're running in 717 gears. They're not having any trouble with them because they're lightweight rigs.
Yep.
You're gonna spin the tire before you break anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
Meanwhile, I'm over here with delaminating Yukons and 538s.
you can with the combinations of transfer cases we have now, you can actually break an axle with your foot off the gas. I've done it. I did it.
Yep.
Literally 5 months ago. You know, you're either gonna go. I tell people, on-road equipment is designed to spin the tire before anything breaks. So if you have a stock vehicle, you'll always spin the tire before it breaks. And if you do something that stops that tire from spinning, now you got just a few limited choices. Tires are going to spin. You're going to move forward. Okay. Engine's going to stall or you're going to brake. Those are your 4 choices every day you go wheeling.
Yep.
I think at this point we've started to master the "you're gonna break" camp.
I don't know. I've been the 1550s and the 05 plus 60s are. I mean, we were talking about how half an inch versus 5/8 makes a difference.
Yes. That's a hell of a
Those are
joint.
massive U joints, and I mean that was my biggest weak point in the 50. I had a
Was
50
it?
before I had the 60, and the
Was it not-
60.
Was it not the ring gear?
Well, the ring gear was breaking, but that was a separate issue. That initially, the first setup it was a Dana 50 with 538s. So,
Okay.
small opinion. It lasted for quite a while before it broke. It wasn't first trip out broke the
Right.
ring and pinion. It lasted multiple years, and I was beating the crap out of that thing and had
Yeah,
no
you were.
no issues until it just popped, and then it was done. Now the second gear set that broke, that was my fault. It did not go in with proper shimmage and proper. I didn't have the bearing race or something wasn't right, so I just made the stuff we had in the shop at that point in time. I had a trip I had to get the Jeep on a
Work.
trailer for
That never happens.
really quickly, and just didn't have enough time to source the correct parts, and I was punished for that one.
Oh yes, yes.
wait,
you
wait,
were.
was
The
definitely punished for that one.
ramifications of that are still going on.
Yeah, there's still I was definitely punished, and then but the thing yeah, we're talking about breaking ring and pinions on a Dana 50, but the biggest thing I blew up on that was the 30 spline outers and
the hubs.
the hubs, but then also the U joints. Or I guess the 30 spline outers. I don't know if I ever blew a U joint without the U joint itself being compromised. I never actually fully blew one out. You could always hear when it was gonna go, right? It
Yeah.
would like kind of pop and creak, and it just didn't sound
That
right when you were
runs-
turning.
That runs the 480 series U joint, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So
So you
that was
going 30 spline outer, even though you had a 30 spline inner.
yep every time. I don't think I ever blew an inner shaft.
That's
Yep.
interesting.
Hmm.
So I'm running a 0460 with chromoly 30 spline outers and 35 spline factory inners in it.
Luke, could you repeat that?
I'm running a 04 Dana 60 Super Duty axle with 538s. I run a chromoly outer with stock inners. The outers are 30 splines, and right now it breaks the lockouts. Like it just sends them to Jesus, and that's
Yeah.
that. Just forget about it. But the only axles I've broken in that have been when I was running the stock stuff. It's broken one stock 30 spline outer at the actual the hub itself, like right where the flange mates. It grenades right there. And then the second one that I broke on the long side cracked all 4 U-joint ears, but the 1480 survived.
Wow.
So I don't understand why that is, but the 30 spline stuff just lets go.
Well, yeah. It's gonna.
Or it lets go before the 1480 does. I think the 1480s are actually stronger than they get credit for.
Yeah, they'll take out a 35 spline.
Yeah. Yep.
And
I personally have never broken a 1480.
Not the I was putting like Luke, the spare shafts you gave me for that 50 that didn't move. Like you couldn't bend these things by hand. You had to hammer them to get it to like flex. And I was like, well, it's they're all together. It's in there. It does move when you hammer it a little bit. I put
what's
that
the
thing in
worst
there,
that can happen?
and that one lasted like probably 6 months of hard wheeling before it even made like a semblance that it
spray
wasn't
WD
happy.
You're supposed to spray WD-40 at the seals and get it to work a little
Oh, it
bit.
was probably leaking at the axle from the axle housing itself onto them, so it was fine.
Okay.
Was it water or was it gear oil that was
I
leaking
had
on
a
him?
customer one time was complaining that something was wrong with his steering box because it would lock up, and he'd had it to several shops.
Mhm.
And it was a 60 front end, and 2 of the caps were rusted, and the other 2 were not. So you could just take that outer axle and just sweep it, either direction. But if you rotate it 90, we
It wouldn't move.
we stuck it in a vise with a 10-foot pipe over it and ripped the vise off the top of the bench, and those U joints would not turn. And so you've seen a rig going down the road, and you kind of see the front drive line going around with the oil. It's not full speed.
Yeah.
So what would happen? He'd be going down the highway, and he'd try to turn out the highway, and if those U joints were in the right spot, no problem. If they're wrong spot, he was locked.
Oh shit!
That's sketchy. That's really
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
These weren't that bad. These were like, definitely not happy, but not.
They were out of the
immovable.
plow truck that they came out of.
Well, that's impressive. Those things kill U joints. I do U joints for this one dude who had a plow truck, and I was just tacking the caps. It was like, this for what you're using it for. This is what you need to be doing. This is what we do on the crawlers. We don't have issues.
Tack
And,
the caps and tack the end of the snap rings.
Yep. Oh, really?
This
At the end
guy
of the snap
gets
ring
it.
too?
I learned that when I was trying to run the 44 gumbos on my Dana 44 Bronco front end.
I never thought to tack the snap rings. That's a fantastic idea.
Well, the snap ring's always the problem. It always falls out if you tack it in. That makes sense.
No. I was egging out those shitty Dana 30 shafts before anything was happening.
Well,
and then that's when I
you're
blow 'em
running
up.
light duty equipment there, bud. You gotta.
Yeah.
So speaking of U joints, you've heard of the Yukon super joint, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I patented that.
What? That's cool.
Yeah.
So
I designed it and patented it. I was at a rock crawl in 2000, and at that time I was running a Dana 60, and back then nobody else was. And I saw like 17 rigs blow up their front U joints, and I'd often thought maybe there'd be a market for a stronger U joint. And back then everybody was running 44 front ends, and you can take a 1480 and carve on it and make bushings and make it fit inside of a Dana 44 in the 1350 U joint.
Mhm.
And I thought,
That sounds like a bitch.
what's that?
That sounds like a bitch, because, like, how would you do that? Set that up in the lathe and then blast that thing down?
Well, the 1350 cap will fit onto the 1480 joint with no needle bearings. Okay. So you got to make a thin wall bushing, and then you got to put it on the lathe, the machine both sides. And I'd thought about doing it. I'd had the pieces in my hand. I'd never completed the job. I just went to a Dana 60 front end. Like I said, I got a hold of those mine cart axles, right?
Yep.
But I saw everybody blowing parts up. This is back in 2000. And, back at that time, who would spend, I have to sell these things for like $250 a piece. Nobody would pay that much, right? And I saw that there would be a market for it. And at the time I was working at Boeing, and so I spent considerable amount of money, about $20,000 on prototyping, and worked out the whole system. And I had a royalty agreement with Randy, and it worked out for a lot of years. And then I went through cancer, and I didn't have enough money to re-up my patent. I thought a patent lasted for 17 years. At 10 years, you have to reapply.
Okay.
I didn't have the money, and I was dying in a hospital bed. So it really sucks because shortly after that, then it really got hitting, man. Oh my God. I'd be a
Jeez.
millionaire if I could have redone that patent. But
Oh.
anyway, so then I came along with the bigger ring gear setup, the Jana kit.
Yep.
Sounds like a perfect time to start telling us about that. So how did you end up kind of getting into that? I know we're kind of skipping over like in between the Bronco to the Super Jeep time frame, but I mean we're here now talking about the kits. So let's kind of what started that adventure?
Well, okay, like I said, I went through cancer, and I was running. I think I was still running the 717s in the Jeep, 60 front and rear. And I didn't have a speedometer on my dashboard, but I had a Hobbs meter, which is an hour gauge. And I literally, every 100 hours, would break a ring and pinion. I mean, I had 400 hours on it, and I've been through 4 ring and pinions.
I mean, the logic checks out. Was it 100 per, or was it 200 per set?
About 100 per. You know, the front would go, and then, you know, within the next 10 or 15 hours, the rear would go, or vice versa. It was
Jeez.
that bad. And I'd actually loaned my Jeep out because I was recovering from cancer, and something broke. And I'm like, I got to do something. And I'm like, I didn't think I could lift like a Huff a Dana 80 around. And at that time, you couldn't just find one. There weren't that many trucks around. So this was 13 years ago. And I just went to the wrecking yard on a Sunday one day, and I looked at differentials, and I noticed the Dana 70. I knew it already, but when you look at it, you're looking at stuff like, well, shit, that Dana 70's got the same cover as the 60. I know they take the same gasket. I'm a machinist. I got lathes and mills. And I was so weak from the cancer, I couldn't see trying to build a whole rear end housing. And I thought, well, what would happen if I could get the 60 out of my rear end, and I took it into the lathe or mill or machine it somehow and got the 70 gears in it. So I got this idea at about 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, wandering through a wrecking yard. I got home at about 4 o'clock. I walked over with a Dana 60 ring gear, or pardon me, a Dana 70 ring gear. I just happened to have a set of leftover 4.56s. And I went over, and they damn near fit in the housing. Just the ring gear. I was like, whoa. You know, if I grind about an 1/8 inch here at the top, that sucker will go in, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, that wasn't too bad. And then I'm like, okay, so a Dana 70 ring or 60 ring gear is 9 3/4 diameter. 70 is 10 1/2. Well, a little quick math says that's 3/4 difference. That's 3/8 on the ring gear, right? So that means the pinion's got to go 3/8 of an inch deeper into the housing. And so I actually took a chunk of aluminum, machined it with about 1,000ths clearance, ID and OD, so it would slip in where your head bearing goes. And the pinion would slip through it. Just put a little grease. Aluminum does not make a good bushing. Put a little grease on it for prototyping. And I machined it 3/8 of an inch thinner than the stock bearing. I put that in there, and now the pinion's sticking out the back of the housing a little bit. But I got about a 1/4 inch of thin shims, and just kept throwing shims. I think I used, you know, like pinion shims out of a 44 or something on the back bearing. And I had just a stack of shims, and I put the pin in there, and So a 60, a 70, and an 80 carrier are all about the same width.
Mhm.
Aftermarket wise, and they all take the same ID bearing. It's 2.5. It's 2.25 on the bearing snout on each side. And so a 60 and a 70U take the same carrier bearing, same pinion bearing, same head pinion bearing. Other than there's a different diameter because a 60 is 5/8 and a 70 is 3/4. So it takes the same outer race, but a different cone goes into it. So there's a lot of similarities. So I just happen to have parts laying around, and now now I got the pinion in there where I want. And I put the carrier in; it's too far over. I just machined about an 1/8 inch off where the ring gear face went on. I mean, just to start with,
Mhm.
literally 3 hours work. I had a pattern.
Wow.
That's good.
And I literally shook because I realized if I could figure out how to do this, I didn't have to machine the housing. I went in there and I machined all these parts.
Mhm.
Means if I can sell this, I can make money.
Hell yeah.
It's so simple. The next day I got on the internet, I literally sat there for 12 hours straight to see if somebody else had done it, and nobody else had done it.
Wow.
So I figured it all out, and I did some prototyping, drove it around, it worked. I put it out on Pirate 4x4, and I'd sold like 10 sets. And then I broke mine. So, hang on a second. So, remember I was saying how close the teeth here on the bearing, and I had the 717s.
Mhm.
I had thinned the bearing so damn thin that the roller bearing poked in between the gear teeth and locked up.
Oh.
Yeah, I got a little bit happy. So I called up my customers and said, if you have it installed, don't install. We got to figure out something different. So I start looking at bearing books. I go to Timken for engineers, and I can find bearings that are thin enough, but they don't have the load rated capacity.
Mhm.
But if you go to Timken for engineers, you'll see tapered roller bearings, double wall bearings, double ball bearings, everything there was. And I saw flange cap bearing. And that's a bearing. Yeah, sometimes you got a snap ring around the outside of it to stop it from going. So they had a little flange on there. I'm like, oh, well, there is your stock pinion race right there.
Mhm.
And I had machined some off of that and some off the bearing that goes in it. I took some off of both sides. I had a step in it, and it worked. But like I say, it forced the roller into the pinion teeth.
Mhm.
Now, if you have a 456 that's big enough, the teeth is big enough, it's up against the wall. I got some customers that I actually built kits to solve the problem, and they never put them in because I had an itty bitty teeth. I had to come under it. So this here is the same bearing, and you see that little 3/8 step in it.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep.
That's Carl making a flange cap bearing. So we just machine a little off of this one side, and when you put it in the bore, it goes in deeper. And that is the whole magic
Mm.
behind the Dana 76 and the 54. And so this actually worked out better. Instead of modifying this piece, the cup and the cone, I just modify the cup.
Yep. And you just run
And
the.
then instead of shimming back here, because you can't shim here, you shim on the head side like you do on a Toyota, like on a Toyota.
Mhm.
And then instead of having to machine the carriers because you got a thicker ring gear, so you got to move the carrier over farther.
Yep.
So even if you're using like 538s, normally you'd use a 4 series carrier. The flange on your carrier is closer to one side.
Mhm.
You actually use the one that's farther away. So
Oh.
you
I
use
mean,
a
it makes sense.
Yeah, use a 373 carrier on a 538s because it gives you more room. And there's some
Oh, yeah,
combinations
yeah, yeah.
where there's
Yep.
not enough room. And this is the stock width carrier bearing here. And I just take 100 thousandths off one side and it still all fits, and it gives you the room you need. You got to move, like I said, you got to move the pinion out for the diameter, and you got to move the ring gear over because it's thicker. It all fits. I've been doing it for 13, 14 years now.
Now, this is going to be a fun question. What is the difference? Wow, excuse me on that. What is the difference between a high pinion 60 in strength and a Jaina 76 kit?
So when the high pinion first came out, they said they were about, it depends on what article you read in Four Wheeler Magazine, but they said the high pinion was 21% stronger than a low pinion. And I got the gears in my hand, and I'm like, I don't see any difference in size. I don't see any damn difference. So what's it stronger? But that was 30 years ago. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the difference. I'll show this with a 9-inch gear because it really shows up.
I love show and tell for the podcast.
Yeah. Sadly for the listeners, they can't really see some of the stuff that's going on, but for us, it's fantastic.
We're trying to describe it as it's happening.
All right. So this is a 9-inch ring gear. It was originally lightened. That's this radius here. And then I couldn't put a load bolt on it. We'll get to that later. I machined it back. This has been machined back for a load bolt. You know what? Let me get a different one so it's not confusing.
This is wild for us because we get to see bits of wheeling history that are just fucking cool.
I'm loving it. I'm loving
I'm
it.
starting to see the credits to Patreon or whatever.
Okay, now notice this is your drive side and it's almost straight. This is your coast side. It's about a 45.
Yep.
Okay. Now
that's cut for relief, right? To allow the gear to slip past for the listeners.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Ford 9-inch. Ford went to his engineers and said, "Give me a small rear end, it won't break." They developed the 9-inch. Okay. There's quite a few. Normally, a gear comes in on center line. If you bring it a little bit below center line, you get more teeth engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Dana's and Toyotas are about an inch and an eighth below center line.
Yep.
The Ford 9-inch is 2.5 below center line. So it's
wow.
acting almost like a worm gear. And so this physically, there's so many teeth in mesh. I wish I had the pinion for this. There's more teeth in mesh than there is almost on a Dana 80.
Wow.
In the same ratio. But you have to have it in a hell of a housing because it forces things apart. So we're going to answer that question you started. Well, okay. So, why is a high pinion 21% stronger than a low pinion in the same size? Okay. Now this 9-inch is almost 0 degrees here and it's 45 here. This is your drive side. This is your coast side. A Dana gear's got about an 8-degree tilt on the drive side, about a 38-degree tilt on the coast side. May as well just grab one of those.
So I'm taking screenshots. So if we wanted to add it in and make it like a multi-pictured post when we do our Instagram post, we can kind of add these things for listeners if they're curious.
All right, so let's get that kind of lined up there. So there's your 8-degree tilt and your 38-degree tilt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now pretend you're out in the schoolyard and you're got that bully and the two of you guys are pushing each other shoulder to shoulder. I did that when you were younger, right? I'll take the bully away and put a piece of plate glass that's straight up and down in front of you and grease your palms. Okay, here's that piece of plate glass straight up and down in front of you. When you push on that with your palms, you're pushing straight up, nothing happens. Now, have your hands greased. Now tip that plate glass 8 degrees away from you. When you push, yes, your hands are going to slide a little bit, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now push it 38 degrees away from you. Like a ski jump, all right?
Yep.
All right, so when you were on the drive side of the ring gear, okay, the 8-degree side, they tend to spread apart a little bit. Now remember, every ring and pinion, every rear ring and pinion is low pinion. And until 1972, every front ring and pinion was low pinion as well. They just took a rear gear and put it in the front. There's no difference between a front gear and a rear gear,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what happens when they put that in the front, those gears are trying to slide themselves apart.
Yep.
So now that gear is 20% or 21 or 19, depending on who you believe, weaker in the front end and the rear end. So in a rear end, if you look at the way it's designed, the pinion pushes the ring gear around.
Mm-hmm.
In a front end, it pulls it around on a low pinion. On a high pinion, they put the pinion from below center line to above center line. They tilt everything around backwards. Now it's pushing it around. And it's pushing on the drive side. So the same diameter, the same thing, only a mirror image is now 21% stronger because you're not getting that ski jump effect.
Yep.
And then what made the Ford 9-inch so freaking strong is the fact that there was no angle even on the drive side. Conversely, the guys that built the high pinion front ends, the Ford 9-inchers,
Mm-hmm.
they had to put a bronze shoe on the backside. You see the rub marks right here?
Yep.
They got a bronze shoe back here to keep the gears from spreading apart because of the ski jump effect.
Okay.
And that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So now, your original question, if I remember it, was the strength difference between a low pinion 60 and a high pinion 60 or a Dana 70?
Between a Jaina 76 kit in a front application and a high pinion in a front application.
Okay, so we're going to compare a 76 low pinion to a 60 high pinion.
Yes.
All right. If you go to Dana's aftermarket and dig around long enough, you'll see their torque output ratings of all this stuff. And you'll find that the Dana 70 gear is rated at 33% stronger than a 60 gear. Okay. Now, I got to do math now. If a high pinion is 21% stronger than a low pinion, and I put a low pinion that's 33% stronger, if I go from a low pinion 60 to a low pinion 70, I've gained 33%. So 21 from 33 is that 12?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
12% stronger.
I was wondering, because of the ski jump effect, if you will, if there was some differential loss in there.
Oh, that's for efficiency?
As for the actual strength, because it's running in the reverse, like it's not in a rear application. So I was just pondering on
That's
that.
21%. You take
Yeah.
You run them back, and all the guys that thought, oh, I'm going to build a high pinion rear end for ground clearance.
That was a silly idea.
And now you know why. Okay.
I had an inkling before because it always seemed like they end up overheating due to the direction that the gear oil has to travel to actually hit the pinion from the pirate days. I remember seeing a lot of the desert guys that were doing that were just burning the pinion bearings clean out of them.
Yeah. You know, I haven't seen that much burnout on pinion bearings myself, but just the teeth break because they're 21% weaker running in reverse.
That's just
So-
wild, the amount of difference that you get from flip-flopping directions. I mean, it makes perfect sense mechanically when you actually look at it.
That is exactly why they invented high pinion gears, because that way they could use a lighter gear and be stronger. That's why they could keep the Dana 44 front end in a 3/4 ton truck without having to go to a 60.
The rock crawlers are all crying in the background right now because the problem isn't the gear set. Even with a low pinion, it's the stupid 760 joints that want to leave the discussion
Well,
way
that's not
too
a problem
early.
if you use it in a factory scenario.
Well, if you run a trooper joint in a 760, you got basically stock Dana 60 strength. I mean, and you're good to a 40. You can, you know,
I drive by Braille, so
recreational wheeling and competition, okay? Because we can break 60 parts with 37-inch tires, in competition.
Yeah.
But I got friends, I got snow wheeling friends that still run 30 fronts with 38-inch tires.
I believe that. There's a lot more give to it, correct?
Well, I have broke more parts snow wheeling than I have anything else. Well, no. I've broke more parts snow wheeling than I have trail running. But competition broke more than anything.
I mean, that makes sense though, because snow wheeling, you're going from like no traction to all of a sudden there could be a rock, a stump, or something that's just gonna full grab traction, and it might just kind of let go. So that makes sense.
And you're double down, and it's well, back in the day with a clutch, you were back and forth all the time. You make 6 inches forward, back up 2 feet, go 6 inches forward. So you're on and off and on and off.
Yep.
I've got an axle that all the cracks to the splines go straight into the center. There's no spiral action to it. And the guys at that's an 1.5-inch. It lasted me 10 years. I got it from Mark Williams. And I was complaining that the root of their teeth were too sharp, caused a stress point. But he said when they break in like that, it was actually from forward and reverse stress, all of backing and forwarding.
Mm.
It all comes back down to those four choices you got: go forward, stall the engine, or break something, or spin a tire.
So let's circle back to kind of the progression wise of like, your journey throughout this whole thing. So what was between the Bronco and then the Super Jeep?
Okay, so I was supposed to be an engineer and work for Boeing and or some big company. But I wound up starting a 4-wheel drive shop in Spokane right out of college.
That's awesome.
And so the predecessor to Super Jeep was a Jeep I built in Spokane called Flat Bad. And it started with 44s front and rear, which was great for a flat fender.
Mhm.
And eventually it got the minecart axles.
Yep.
So pretty much just the progression was Scout, Bronco, Flatbed, Super Jeep. That covers from 14 to 65. Because I'll be 65 in about 3 or 4 months. I've had some other ones there on the side,
Mhm.
but I've had a couple Broncos through the years. But I started a 4-wheel drive shop out of college, and that was from 84 to 89. And we just had so much fun. I was based out of Spokane, and we were doing we had a guy come in one time, and he had some leaf springs, and he has to have an arch. They had like a 14 or 16-inch arch.
Jeez.
I like, where did you get those? Well, there's this company, they're still in business in Spokane, called Pole Spring Works, and they can hammer out leaf springs and make any arch you want. And he'd taken some pickup springs in on the back of a pickup, and he told them, arch them until they're, I don't remember what the dimension is, but let's just say 42 inches eye to eye, which is what stock Toyota springs were. Okay.
Okay.
This is a 14-inch lift kit, like on about a what were the early Toyotas or what? 78 or what's the early Toyota 4-wheel drives? The Gen 1s.
I have no
We
idea.
could just go with the Gen 1s. We're
Yeah,
all Cherokee guys.
lift kit, and we had to cobble up some kind of steering thing, and we heated and we bent shit around and put shocks on it and made him sign all kinds of shit. And we left the parking lot with some 38s on it and headed back to Montana. It was wait, oh my goodness. So yeah, that was back, and people would come in with their lift kits. We had a lift kit at Smoking Rod one time. It was a 5-inch body lift and an 8-inch suspension lift. Okay.
Oh boy.
All right. The body lift consisted of hockey pucks. They're 1-inch thick, real good with all thread. That was on the
That's a
bed.
lot of hockey pucks. What's that
This
like?
is a square body Chevy. The bed was pieces of 3/4-inch pipe cut in 5 inches long, standing on the bed. So the bed's on here like on toothpicks, right? And there
Jeez.
was dents between the bed and the cab. And this thing moving around. The rear lift blocks were 3x3 square tubing, cut 8 inches long, stood on end, no center
Oh
column.
God.
And when he got crooked, he'd just loosen the U-bolts and use a come along to shift it back right.
Jesus.
The front leaf spring lift, okay, was, I think, factory springs. He got like an add leaf and put in there. So there was 3 front springs and then a stack of 1-inch plates. Again, nothing pinning them together.
Holy shit.
I have had guys come in with lift kits that were actually 4x4s bolted between axles and leaf springs.
That is
And so
terrifying.
we actually, and then the cops came in and they wanted to know it was safe. So we actually put on a few classes and taught about, what to look for and what not to look for the cops when they pull these people over. There
Jeez.
was one company in town and they did double frames. They would stack one frame on top of the other.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that before.
Yep.
I've only ever seen pictures of that.
Then they'd bond it in between and they'd have your 44-inch Dixie picks on there. And they wouldn't do them unless it was a 3/4 ton differentials. They didn't want to do them for half tons, right? So they go to the wrecking yard and get these old closed knuckle 3/4 ton front ends, which actually had smaller U joints in them, right? They had the 260 instead of the 760 or the 297, right?
Mm-hmm.
In there, but it was 3/4 ton. So I've just seen a ton of crazy shit through the years.
I can imagine in like the 70s, or I guess, yeah, 70s, 80s when you were doing that, body lifts and all that, and some questionable. Yeah.
Smoking Rods was 84 to 89.
Yeah.
And, guys would just come in and they wanted everything jacked in the moon. And we did it. You got to have your KC daylighters on there and your winch bumpers.
And it doesn't matter how it's that tall. It just has to be that tall.
That was,
I still got a lot of love for the KC Daylighters, though.
right?
They were just cool. That was the only cool part about those. And now, like, I run the Hellas on my Jeep because just as like a homage to that.
You broke one.
I already ordered another set. Don't worry about it.
I always get a kick out of, whether it was the CBA or the Hellas or whoever it was, they talk about how great this light bulb was in there and how many watts it put out. And when you open them all up, they have an H3 bulb in the back.
I just like the way that it looks at this point, and they're cheap, they're easy to throw on, and it's old school.
Yep.
Other than that, they're just kind of shitty lights. Light bars do everything better at this point.
Yeah, I could never. I wanted to run them because they look cool, but in action, I either knocked them off the top or some idiot would wrap a winch cable around them when they're on my bumper and something would go wrong.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
fun.
I love the little light bars.
Yeah,
Plus
so
they've got-
like stay out of the way. That's why I don't run any lights on mine. Is it's just I have in the past, and they just get smashed to shit, and
Right.
then you're
Right.
buying new lights, and you know.
I was doing good until I kissed that tree in
Well,
falling
you always are.
sideways.
That's everyone's excuse,
You-
right?
you-
You're doing great till you hit the tree, and all your
Yeah.
lights are gone, and you're. Yep.
You see all these mall crawlers, and I think, okay, dude, you think you got a 4-wheel drive? Look, you have to be able to roll, not a high speed roll. You have to be able to roll and keep going. You have to be able to get in water. You know, I don't like being submerged in water. It just causes problems. But, you know, you almost have to make everything waterproof so when you pressure wash it, it still holds
Yeah.
up. And it's a tough sport for just the maintenance. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I saw that you were on, what was it, Alaskan Off-Road Warriors or whatever that was.
Yeah.
What kind of maintenance went into making that happen?
Hold on, talk about the
All right.
Super Jeep first because I've been waiting patiently because I'm so excited to talk about Alaska, but I want to hear about the Super Jeep first. Tell us kind of the process of that and then Alaska, please.
Okay, sure.
What's going on, guys? Sorry to stop you right in the middle of the episode, but we need to go into this week's sponsor. Onyx Off-Road is the leading competitor in interactive off-road GPS. They offer pinpoint accuracy for not only rock crawling trails, but for side-by-sides, ATVs, and snowmobiles. Nothing is worse than going to your local park and wasting your time using their janky, outdated paper maps. You spend enough time stuck in traffic or at work, so when you're on trail, use that time wisely and know where you are at a click of a button. But hey, don't just trust my opinion. Onyx Off-Road has some unique and key features, such as being able to save maps for offline use, adding custom waypoints, track, save, and share trips amongst friends, and not to mention, for our fancy drivers, Onyx Off-Road even syncs up with Apple CarPlay and Android Play. Seriously, try Onyx Off-Road Elite free for a week, no strings attached. Get access to thousands of off-road trails, whether that be dirt or snow, and go send your favorite trails to your friends and start planning the trip of a lifetime now. Guys, please go over there, check them out, and now back to the shenanigans.
So I got I told you Flatbed was the predecessor to Super Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, leaf spring front and rear. And people were they were coming up with link systems and whatnot. And so in 93, I kind of put Super Jeep together in my head and I drew up a link system for the rear end. I was trying to get 12 inches of wheel travel. And I figured it out so that the rear end went down, the pinion came up.
So, and for people that don't know, what is Super Jeep? Like, what kind of vehicle is it?
It's a 1942 flat fender.
Mm-hmm.
The body is stretched 25 inches. The wheelbase is stretched 20 inches. It only has about a 5-inch lift kit on it, but the fenders have been raised 4 inches. So it was originally designed to run 44-inch tall tires. I've had as tall as 47s on it. It now runs 46-inch Mickey Thompson. And so the wheelbase.
Mickey Thompsons are great.
Yep. The wheelbase is now right at about 101 inches, which just happened to be what my Bronco was, and I always liked that. And then it's got a small block Chevy in it. I've had a truck 4-speed in it with a Dana 300, and I now have a highly built Turbo 400. It has a switch pitch torque converter in it, so I can vary my low stall, so I can go from a low stall converter to a high stall converter.
That's cool.
How does that work? I mean,
let
sorry.
me finish. And so I've got the Turbo 400, I switched the gears from 2.5 to 1 first gear into 3 to 1 first gear. And then it's got a trans brake on it, so I can drag race it. And then I got a black box in between that and Dana 300 inside a Colossus case. And then Dana 76s with ARBs, front and rear, full float rear axle, 35 spline alloys. And I cut and resplined all this. Everything, virtually every part on this except the firewall, I did myself.
Oh
And
yeah.
the firewall, I had a drunk do that, and the body's crooked. But
Jeez.
that was many years ago.
Say you rolled it.
No, never mind.
There you go.
So-
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I have managed to tip it over a couple times, and I did a marvelous pirouette at a rock crawl one time, and I got my best score because I went over forward, stood it on the bumper, and I hit the gas to pull your wheels forward. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a wire was loose inside the dash, so I hit the gas and nothing happened, and it kind of spun around and landed on its side backwards, and we tipped it back over, and well, the finish line ain't that far away, and that time it fired right up. I slammed it in reverse and drove off. I got 1 point for stopping and 1 point for backing. Best score of the day.
So let's circle back to the link conversation. You're mentioning about pinion angle and things.
All right, so yeah, I outsmarted myself. I had the links in such a way that as the rear end went down, the pinion came up, and that induces so much body roll. It almost it actually self actuates because they're so short. If you put a broomstick on a ground and push it straight, and then you keep putting a broomstick on the ground and lifting it up, eventually it'll dig in and catapult. And that's exactly what my rear links were, because they were about like this, going from the frame down the rear axle. So when I give it the gas, it'd jam the frame up in the air. And if I got on a tilt, it would jam the frame up in the air. And if I got in a bind, it would walk like this. It would just go all the way to the end of the travel. And I did the force calculations. If you push it, if you're at this angle and you push 1,000 pounds forward, you're pushing 600 pounds upward. So I got to my first rock crawl, and it was almost death. I had to put chains on it to limit it from going. So then I redid the linkages on the rear, and I still had leaf springs back in the day. But I had little rollers so that the rear end could work independent of the leaf springs because I had the links. And as a result of that, I bent and sanded a lot of leaf springs. So finally, I went to some coils back there, and everybody goes, "Man, your rear links are so long. How'd you build it that long?" Well, I bought a piece of 10-foot steel and I cut it in half. So now I don't get that actuation problem, and it really corners flat and level and good. And if you look at any race truck, they're running long stuff. Mine looks funny with the long links on the short vehicle. But
Yeah.
if you look at any desert race truck, that's about what I got in it. The back end handles phenomenal, and I still have the old 72. What is it? 72 to 86 front blazer springs. The old trucks, they had the negative arch springs on the front. When you put them on a flat fender, they're about a straight arch for a spring over.
I mean, it makes sense.
Oh,
It's so
TJ,
much lighter.
What's that?
It's so much lighter. It makes sense.
Yeah. And then I've got just a chunk of, I think it was off a CJ7 front spring, about this long, kind of control the anti-wrap. And then eventually I figured out, well, that's another whole story, but I have a sliding link bar that works with the leaf spring. I finally figured out how to do it. It works great. And that's on the front. And I've been going to actually do independent front suspension, and I got pieces built for the last 5 years, and in all that time, we weren't going to talk about a divorce, but one happened. My nephew, he says, Unc, better is the enemy of good enough, and that thing's pretty damn good. I might never get to my independent front suspension, although I sure want it because it rides so well. I got the rears all dialed in. After we haven't got to Alaska Off-Road Warriors yet, but when I came back from Alaska Off-Road Warriors, I got rid of the weird shocks. I just had whatever I found and some coil springs, probably out of a who knows what hacked in there, and I put King coilovers on there with dual rate springs and did it upright, and it's nice.
Hell yeah. King makes great shit.
Doesn't rust. Not like the Fox stuff. I don't know. The Fox stuff is pretty good, but if I look at the Fox shocks I just put on a rig not too long ago, and they've only been on that thing for a year, they are very corroded. I've had mine and driven it quite a while, and they're not anywhere near as bad. They're a little bit.
Colin have Kings though?
Colin does too, yes.
Yeah, and aren't his corroded? So isn't this
Not
kind of null
like
and
Sean's
void?
are. Not like Sean's
Oh,
are.
okay. Well, that's different. Yeah, you're right.
He,
Sean's are.
that thing
yes.
sits in the winter. It doesn't drive on the road. It's never driven on the road. He takes it on the trailer in the salt one time, and it's every shock is rough. I had
Rusty.
to clean a bunch of them to get them to free up the adjusters.
A quick little tip is if you actually put antifreeze on the threads, like actual antifreeze. I did it on my my Volkswagen when I put coilovers on it. I don't know why, but they didn't corrode like the rest of my dumbass friends that were putting coilovers on our cars. For some reason, or just I got lucky
Where
with
are you
my.
getting salt from?
So we live in Massachusetts where they love to throw like calcium chloride and all sorts of random things because they didn't realize that beet juice will actually also help the roads not freeze. And it's ridiculous the amount that we throw down. It is too much.
Connecticut too.
Yeah.
Okay,
So anytime in the wintertime you drive down the road, I mean you're just blowing holes in your ship.
Yep.
It's
You can
self-inflicted.
basically watch it go and rot away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the factors in my move to Tennessee, was getting away from the rust.
It wasn't the
Yeah.
gun laws.
That was
on-
definitely a part of it, but the not rusting out vehicles doesn't hurt either.
Back on the King shocks, I learned there's a difference between the standard and the race shock versions. And I don't have bypass, and I do have remote reservoir, but they're still not considered a racing shock. The shaft on my shocks, they are chrome plated, and rocks off the front tire hits the chrome plate and pecks it off.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the actual racing shock, you get an induction hardened industrial chrome shaft. And those you could beat on with a sledgehammer and not hurt. And so my seals are starting to go. And so I'm gonna go down to I'm just gonna buy hardened chrome shaft, and I can lay out my own for what they want for them.
So something I learned kind of from like my dirt bike years was, every time you nick one of like on a fork, it's the same idea as like a coilover. Right as you nick that shaft, you're gonna start tearing seals, and then you're gonna start rebuilding your shit a lot more often. Then again, though, I haven't started dabbling too much into the coilover world when it comes to Jeeps and off-road rigs. But forks on a dirt bike are a lot more like personal rebuildable. Like you could go to any of your parts store, pick up parts, and you can rebuild it yourself. Now, does King offer like rebuild kits and stuff like that, or is it worth to just save up? Okay, so that's good to know.
You can buy every piece individually.
So that's good. Okay, so at least it's like, I mean, I don't know the exact price comparison between the two, but I guess maybe it's worth it to just rebuild them every 2 years, 3 years. I don't know.
If their prices are anything like PSC, you're almost better off just buying a new RAM every time you blow it up. I mean, for the seal kit, they upsold me on the seal kit too. The seals were fine. The actual rod was just bent. They're like, oh, if you're gonna change
I
the
went
shaft,
with
you should change the seals.
Redneck Ram,
Mhm.
and they just use standard seals. You can buy at any
Yep.
industrial.
I'm sure PSC does
Yeah.
too. The seals looked fine to me. It's not leaking. I didn't put the seals in. I still have the seal kit. So
I can put up with a drip or a seep once in a while, and they start pissing.
yeah,
Out.
it wouldn't be the worst thing leaking, right? It's not a.
There's a
Yes.
lot leaking on my rig at the moment.
Oh boy.
Oh, yeah.
So we spoke on Alaska. Let's get into this because I'm fucking excited to hear
Okay.
how did you get invited? Did you have to send in a letter? Like, how did this even start?
This was pure dumb luck. Okay. So my partner, my co-dog on that show, Redmond, he does electric vehicles. He was on the last episode of Monster Garage, and they built a 480 volt powered 70 Dodge Charger. He was also on the Travel Channel. They did a rig called Gone Postal. Now, so he's kind of a character, right? If you've seen the show. So here's how it works. The show comes out on the History Channel, but History Channel does not do the shows. The shows are done by independent studios. And Deadliest Catch, they kind of got the I just got tongue tied. The reality TV show thing going, right?
Yep.
And if you go to Original Productions, it's called Original Productions, you'll see all the TV shows they've come out with, and there's dozens you've never heard of because they were, shown in another like an Eastern or a Southern market, and they flop in one season or they never got. So the producers come up with ideas for TV shows. They then sell it to a channel, and then the channel gives them money, and they go out and produce the show. Is the way this is the way Hollywood works.
Yep.
So Hollywood has talent scouts, and the two main producers of Original Productions, they were into desert racing, and they'd had an idea to do a four-wheel drive show for many years, and they finally sold the idea to the History Channel, and their talent scouts, they put ads in magazines up and around Alaska, and that's because most of the people came from Alaska. They had ads in magazines and on message boards and stuff. But I guess they wanted to add more drama to it. And so they were going around message boards, and somehow Rudman is building an electric four-wheel drive. Maybe it'd be cool to have an electric four-wheel drive on the show. So they called up, and I just happened to be there when we got the call, and we were just talking over the speakerphone, and he goes, well, it's not ready to go yet, but I got a buddy's got a Jeep that's ready to race. And we started bullshitting, and so we did a Zoom call the next night, or hell, I was about 4 hours later that night, and we sold them on us as a couple TV characters.
That's cool.
Awesome.
So then you've got the jitters for literally 10 weeks before the show comes along, and every time you talk to them, they go, "Oh, we don't want you to do anything to rig. We're not sure if you're going or not." Well, I found out later that that's just a ploy to get you there to be totally unprepared. They really want, right? They don't want to see a bunch of pros race. They want to see a bunch of yahoos, right? You see the show, I think they did a really good job. You have to figure it just. I actually found in the back of my Jeep a little notebook, and it had all the personality types of all of us on there. Now, the producers couldn't tell us what to do. Okay. It's not scripted. We were not union actors. Okay.
Yep.
But they could say things like, "Do you know what so and so just said? You know what so and so just did?" So they would egg us on. And so they had all our personality types, and they knew, what would get underneath our skin.
Yeah, how to
So,
turn that crank.
yeah. So the basic formula to any reality TV show, I hate to spoil the plot, but
Oh
you
no,
got good
sell
guys.
that plot right out.
Okay, every one of them. Good guys, bad guys, assholes, idiots, and ne'er-do-wells.
Can I-
Okay?
we kind of do the same thing here, but I'm just the town idiot. That's it.
I don't know who we were picked to be, but
What do you
it's
think you were?
it's just
What do you
the
think your role
formula.
was?
Well, I clearly hope I was a good guy.
I don't know. Were you the only guy from? I mean, it's been a while since I watched the show, but were
I
you
was
the only one from the? Were you the
I
only
was
one from the lower 48?
There was supposed to be another. There was actually supposed to be another rig, and now the producers are not supposed to talk to the people, but it happens. Okay, you're together. We're up there for 7 weeks. Okay,
Wow.
and there were supposed to be some other guys. I'm just going to call them rednecks from down south. And they decided there were just a little bit too much of the, the banjo players guy kind from. Yeah, that's right. They're just a little too much that, so they didn't bring him up.
That's
And
a long
so-
haul for Southern guys too. They probably would have bailed last minute anyways.
Luke, by the way, that sounded crazy on my end, and I'm absolutely cutting what you said because on my end, that did not sound like you playing the banjo. That's all I'm gonna say.
It sounded like the banjo to me.
I'll listen to it, Bo. Oh boy.
Maybe your audio was cutting out, but it sounded fine to me. I don't know what you're thinking.
It's fine. Anyways, keep going. Sorry.
So then they take you out and you start racing. It's a crazy thing because you go out in the woods and you set up a camp, and they spend all day long putting microphones on you. They spent like 3 days putting the cameras in the Jeep. We had forward, backward, one underneath, 3 inside, and they trying to mount them so you get the action, but you can't tell there's another camera there.
Mm-hmm.
And once in a while, when you're watching the show, you'll see a little red light up in a corner or something. To get you all set up for sound. And then you go like hell for about an hour and a half. Then everything stops, which you don't see on the show. And then they change the batteries out. And you go like hell for another hour and a half. And I can tell you, we don't know where we're going. We're going fast, but you can't go that fast, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you come around a corner, and there's like 5 or 6 camera guys and producers on a hillside. And there's tripods with cameras set up. And there are drones in the air. And they're all pointing at this fucking mud hole, and they want you to go through it. I'm thinking, no fucking way. Now, the rules, and one of the problems is there's supposed to be 12 episodes, but History Channel only gave them enough money for 8. It's a typical reality TV show. You get the first show where you meet the characters. I mean, pardon me, you meet the people, right? So it wouldn't take you 6 episodes to figure out that Pete and Shay are brother and sister. You can't tell if they're kissing cousins or what they are. But we didn't go over the rules. We didn't go over the characters. We didn't go over the rigs. We just shotgun blast and we started racing. And one of the rules were you can have tires bigger than 37s, and so Super Jeep's built for 44s. So I got these teeny little tires on. I got 589 gears, and at that time I had to overdrive, but my fucking motor's spinning $6,000 all day long. Just it's crazy. Got a little lost where I was at here. The rules were you couldn't go green. You had to stay brown. What that means is if you're on a road, a dozed, plowed, maintained road, you have to stay between the cut banks, how it was built. If you're on a trail, just like we're out wheeling and teaching people, you got to stay on the trail, right?
Yeah.
Well, I seem to be in the lead a lot, right? And I'm on a trail and I got to stay on a trail, which means I got to go through the mud hole or the ruts or whatever. And every time I get stuck, you see the Alaskans drive around me. They're going green. They're cheating. I guarantee you, if I'd have done that to them, they'd all screamed I was cheating.
Mm-hmm.
So
Damn.
we followed the rules and kicked their ass anyway. But
So
I pulled around that corner and they want us to go through this big mud hole. And we'd heard that a guy with 42s had got stuck in it, tractor tires had got stuck in it like 2 days before. 'Cause the way it works is the camera crew and the producers go out with local guides and they scout out areas and they do this kind of leapfrog effect. They go out and go, we're going to race this way or that way. You got a land matters person so you can shut the area down so people aren't there. You don't want to run into some stray miner or whatever, or some hunters. And so you do this leapfrog effect. They figure out where you're going. I've been doing it for 2 months, but still. And then you race by all their stuff. And you might just race by, and then there's a TV timeout, and then you drive 20 miles and go past another mud hole and race through it. It's crazy. But you start out about 10 in the morning, and sometimes you go till 1 or 2 at night because it's 20. Once you're above the Arctic Circle, it's light 24 hours.
Mhm.
It gets a little dim, but you can see the sun 24 hours. It's crazy. So the long days of shooting and racing like a bat out of hell or sitting around doing absolutely nothing. And okay, so I heard that we're going through this mud hole that one of the guides got stuck in with 42s. I'm like, no way in hell do I want to go through that. So I get to one side of the road and I figure I'm going to back up and charge the other side. And some bitch, somewhere I flicked the switch and turned my front air locker off. And so I buried that sucker and got a winch out.
Jesus.
I lost one of my Max track. We spent 45 minutes trying to find a Max track. It's just gone. Finally said, we better get going. And while we were stuck, everybody drives around us who'd been avoiding the mud hole, but that was technically off the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we win fair and square. I pulled so many cameramen out. Jason, the guy in the green Rover, I drug him 15 miles to the highway after his oil thing broke and he lost the oil and chewed up his main bearings. And we get to the highway and it's like, well, we can't end it here. So then I tow him a mile and a half back in, and we all have this little scene where, well, I guess you're screwed. You got to go home. There's a scene in the show towards the end where the brothers, they shut the rig off at night. The next morning it would not start, and we were at a hotel. Okay. Well, we can't be at a hotel because we're
No.
supposed to be going across the country, right? So I wasn't privy to this, but they asked what to do, and they said, well, they towed him out on the road, and it shows them trying to start the engine and whatnot, and then you just see him kind of walk off, the two brothers and their dog. I had people more than once came up to me after that show and chewed my ass out for leaving them all alone in the middle of nowhere.
What?
And I
It's
would look
TV, dude.
I would look at
Jeez.
the people and I said, okay, so there's a dog and two people walking. Who do you think is filming them? And they kind of
Yeah.
have a blank stare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys probably don't. You guys ain't going to remember this, but anybody over 40 will. You know Geraldo Rivero, right?
I
No.
don't.
Yes.
Okay, well-respected newscaster. He did this thing on Al Capone's vaults in San Francisco, and they had this big deal, big weekly special or whatever it was, and they were going to open up Capone's vaults and maybe they're going to find some gangster stuff or some gold or some money he had hidden down there in these chambers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they picked this thing up for weeks on TV. And finally, Geraldo's opening up the door. And then the next camera angle, you see him come through the door. And that's the day it hit me. There's a cameraman in there waiting for him. Right? Like, you know? So, yes, there was cameramen out there waiting for the brothers. So a person could go, reality TV shows aren't real. But I guarantee you it's real when you're doing it. You're putting your heart and soul into it. And I fainted. I screamed and worked so hard in those mud holes. And in a downtime, we were talking to one of the cameramen. And I said, I was watching Ice Road Truckers. And that was a pretty good show. And then they did Ice Road Truckers India. And every time a tire went over the road or something happened or somebody, the camera angle was perfect. I realized it's all set up.
Yep.
Right? He says, well, it's not all set up, but it is reality TV. I said, let me give you an example. Because and this is kind of where I got the good guys, bad guys, idiots, assholes, and ne'er-do-wells. He said, we were following the ne'er-do-wells. These guys are always broke down all the time. So we're good. Somebody's coming in the door.
That's okay.
Well, you always have the teams that, they got their shit together and the people that don't have their shit together. And their job was to follow the idiot around, right? So his truck's broke down. He's going down. He had to get a rental truck to tow his boat with a janky trailer hitched somewhere to go fishing or whatever he did, right?
Mhm.
Probably was a fishing show. They're going down a hill and they hit the railroad tracks, that are level, and then the hill. It's on a highway and it bounces and the trailer, they hit the brake and the trailer hitch jumps off and punches in the back of the rental truck.
Oof.
Well, they didn't set the truck up like we had with cameras front and back and all around because it was a rental for the day or two while the guy's truck got back. Oh shit, we didn't get that. Reality TV show. Hook it back up, drive to the top of the hill, set a couple cameras up, and voila, bam, we got reality. So, you're telling a story. You're sitting around at a campfire. You're telling a story. They're telling a story, and we love stories.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I haven't seen it. I'll have to watch it. It's now on
okay.
the list.
Wait, you never saw it? I mean,
I haven't seen. No.
It's been around for a long time. I remember watching it.
On Hulu and the History app. They play.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out now.
That means
It
you're
looks
gonna
really
get it on
cool. And
Plex,
it sounds
right?
really cool hearing about it, but I have not seen it.
Do you still get royalties from it?
I can get nothing.
Oh, perfect. So pirate it off of Amazon and watch it on Plex, Graham.
There are no royalties. We're called unscripted.
Mhm.
So like I was going over, am I actually going to get paid off? We got paid $2,500 per episode. And we got room and board and we got insurance. Okay. And we were promised if our rig got broke down, they'd get it back home for us. They actually put it on a barge, which cost like $2,500 to ship it up to Alaska and each way.
Shit.
That was back then. Yeah. So I was trying to go over this contract, which says you've got no rights and you can't do this or that. And we own the material forever throughout the university in perpetuity, or I said that word in the future forever and ever. Okay.
Mhm.
And then I'm reading if a union actor goes around a corner, a stunt car driver, and he lifts a tire up on 3 wheels. The first time that show airs, he gets $1,500. The next time he gets $1,000. Next time he gets $500. Eventually, he gets down. He's getting like maybe $2 every time on reruns, right? I'm like, dude, I'm gonna have tires in the air for a fucking week. I'm gonna make a lot of money. No, it doesn't work that way for us.
So when we spoke to Sam, I can't remember. Did they pay for his travel to get to Truck Night in America? Was it Sam? Fuck, is his name not Sam? The one
Sam
with the
McIntyre.
McIntyre. Okay, I just want to make sure.
I
I can't
wanna
remember
get
it.
on that show so bad.
It's over now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they stopped doing it, but they did two episodes or 2 seasons.
Two seasons.
Yep. It was kind of a fun setup. They had you do some kind of
Wacky.
goofy stuff, right?
Yeah.
Just weird situations that.
It was definitely weird.
I really enjoyed all that stuff. I was scared to go because I was afraid you got to get in that tug of war. And I'm like, fuck, I want to break something, you know?
Blow everything up. Yeah.
Blow something up. But yeah, I think I could have won that one easy.
That'd have been cool. So then, did you get anything extra for winning or no?
Yes. The winner.
And sorry, spoilers for people who haven't watched the show and are going to plan to watch it from this point on. But I think it's 2 years you're supposed to give people before spoilers. It's been a little over 2 years.
Right. Okay, so the winner's got $100,000.
Hey, there you go.
Well, let's break this down, okay? Me and my partner had a little argument because it's my Jeep, but I wouldn't have gone on the show if it wasn't for him. And I wouldn't have been able to get ready if it wasn't for his credit card because I was in the middle of it. The Jeep was half tore down when I actually started. So we spent buku money and we had to buy the 37-inch tall tires. And we had to replace
they didn't give those to you? They didn't buy them for you? Come on.
In fact, I contacted Interco and tried to get them sponsored. Hey, I'm going to be on the show, blah, blah, blah. And they gave them to me at a deal, but and I had to buy the beadlock rims, you know? So I really didn't get any great deals. So we split it 50-50. All right. And then it's taxed as gambling. So yes, it's taxed as gambling winnings. So we each got $30,000. Okay.
Damn.
Now, it took me 10 weeks to get ready for the show, 8 weeks to do the show. So we're at 18 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you get back, it took me another 8 weeks to recover. So that is, what are we up to now? 22? No. We're up to 30 weeks.
Yep.
And then the show happens. And you can't get anything done for the next 12 weeks because people show up at your house at all hours in the day. So it takes 36 weeks out of a 52-week year. And if you make an average of $1,000 a week out of your shop, you're actually gone backwards.
Yeah.
So it seems like we won $100,000, but we didn't. We kind of broke even, and we had the greatest time ever.
Yeah, all those other guys, they're in the hole.
Well, at least they were from Alaska, though. So you know what I mean. So at least
yeah, that's less of a hike for them. They're probably doing that every weekend. It would have just been fun.
And we're all good friends. We're all good friends. There's some yelling and bantering going on, and I know all the shit that happened behind the scenes. And
sorry, I was just double checking our time frame here. That's honestly, it's so cool because I remember watching that so long ago too, and just like experiencing it, and then it just, why is it that it seems like off-roading based shows just don't stick? Like, is it just not enough people to like enjoy it, and they just don't see the numbers? Like, I don't know. Is it just niche?
I can tell you about Truck Night in America, and obviously Alaska Off-Road Wars. I'd be watching those, and nobody even knew they were playing.
Yeah,
they don't get a lot of. You got to have a lot of pre-show advertising, and they just didn't get it. Now, for a show to continue, you need about 1 million viewers per episode. And we're like 790, 880, 930, 880,000. We just never broke the million mark. We're close.
Close, yeah.
And it just didn't happen. And what I heard also is really expensive to produce that because there's literally 45 people chasing 5 rigs around for 1,800 miles.
That's going to cost something.
That's big cost. And I saw one of their rigs And he had the KC daylighters on top of his Chevy with the 42-inch ag tires, okay, and a 12-inch lift kit. And the only thing you could see sticking out of the water was his ankles and his body standing on his cab and the KC daylighters. He took a wrong turn at a creek crossing.
Jeez.
You know, they had 6x6s, they had side by sides and trucks, and those poor guys, they paid the locals $1,000 a day and $500 a day for their rig or their trailer. And I think they still broke even because they were hauling a camera crew. They went through a lot of the same shit we did. You know,
Wow.
that was some rough shit up there. I have never experienced anything like muskeg. That is the craziest shit.
Mm-hmm.
What you've got is you've got 3-4 foot of grass and mud floating on top of ice or water. So the first guy drives through and it all just kind of goes like this and back up again. The next person, there's a scientific term for it. I don't remember what it was, but if you've got, I don't remember what it is, but there's a type of material, if you press on it, you can't push through it. But if you wiggle your hand a little bit, your hand will go right through it.
Non-Newtonian fluid.
That's it. Non-Newtonian fluid. That's
Richie coming in clutch.
That's why we keep him around.
What the fuck?
Non-Newtonian fluid. That's what muskeg is. And then all the trees you'd think you hook to a tree and winch to, no, because their roots
Pull right over.
Their roots go down in that shit and they hit ice, so they never set in. So you just keep pulling them out with the winch. They all look like they're half dead because they are. I call it the black forest. These trees, they'll sprout and they grow up about 10, 12 feet tall and the wind blows them over. They ain't much to winch to. And and of course I didn't bother to read the instructions, even though, so I got with the gal, you might have heard of Max Gramillion. He makes the Premier Power Welder, and they make the Pull Pal.
I've heard of the Premier Power Welder. I haven't heard of the
Heard
other
of
one.
the Pull Pal.
Yeah, they're both made by a company in let's keep it non-adult here. No. They're out of Colorado and they've been around, since the 70s. Max passed away. I think his wife's getting up there. I think she still runs a business. And so she sent me a Pull Pal and she says, if it pulls out, put it back in the same spot. It'll dig deeper. Well, the first time we get to use it, we're all jacked up on adrenaline. I don't remember this shit. So I must have pulled a half a dozen trees out before I found a couple that were about right. We never did use it right. If it pulls through, go deeper. But that thing was a lifesaver up there because there's nothing to winch to. And then the creek crossings, oh my God. You'd be going along, you'd be hub deep, you're thinking nothing to it. But when a river goes around a bend and it all looks like it's 50 feet wide and a foot and a half deep, but just before it gets to the bank on that curve, it does this number. And the next thing you know, you're into your headlights. Oh, shit. And there was some stuff that happened that didn't get on camera because we were just driving down the road on the way back out. And every day the sun comes out, it warms up the glaciers. The glaciers melt. And so what was 6 inches deep at 6 o'clock in the morning could be 6 feet deep. I'm exaggerating a little bit. It adds a couple feet.
Yep.
Wow.
And we went back down some roads. You see fresh tracks on each side of the river. I'm like, oh, that's our tracks from 2 days ago. And then the guy in front of you goes in and he tips over and disappears on one side, and the water literally pushes him back upright as he speeds across.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And he just put his snorkel, he was one of our guides, and he just put a snorkel extension on. He had an FJ40 on 40s with a spring over. So he's up in the air pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he tipped literally sideways and the water pushed him back up. And had he not put the snorkel on, I don't know what had happened. So now we're all on our own trying to figure out how to cross the thing. I've got a land matters person with me, and he says, well, let's try going across here. Like I said, just for the bank, we dipped down and I throttle out, and our seats got wet from the water going in one door and out the other. And Pete and Shay decided they didn't want anything of that. I had nightmares on this because I wish I had a little rig. Now, here, I'll just do this with a water bottle. They had a snorkel, one of those ARB snorkels that comes up the windshield.
Yep.
Mhm.
And they saw where we went across, and they went to a spot, and it looked like they were doing just fine. And right for the bank, they dipped down. And on the water line, they went down to the water line. The water, here's the snorkel, and the water line's this finger. I don't know if I'm getting that.
Yep.
All I can say is it did this curve thing like this. And if they'd have been 3 inches deeper, the snorkel would have went under. And they went across, hit the loop, and went just like that and shot out the bank. And the water came over their windshield, over their rig, everything.
Holy shit.
And
Yeah,
the
that's gonna be a no for me, dog.
only thing was that snorkel just stayed right in that little curve. And I watched that. And I thought they're going to die. It gave me nightmares for about 3 or 4 nights after that. I mean, and the water's flowing, it's moving.
Yep. Jeez.
It was one. It's real when you're doing, but one hell of an adventure.
Wow. I remember watching this video. I forget exactly. I think it might have been Oklahoma. I remember watching this video, and there's like this like a little bit of like I don't know if it's a pond crossing or whatever, and it goes up into this steep climb, and it's Wrangler of some year, and this guy goes up into it and just flips over straight back into the water, and that gives me nightmares. I thought of flipping into water. That's no bueno.
I was at a race this summer or this spring or last fall, somewhere in there. Yeah, last fall. And we're doing a tough truck, and the guy hit it just wrong, and he did an endo, and he was in about 2 foot of water, but he was upside down, and he had about a 16th plate on his roll bar cage, and it hit the water so hard. If you took an old a ceramic plate and just broke it in pieces, that's the way his aluminum top broke when it slapped the water.
Oh wow.
Jeez.
Yes. And so his head, the roll bar went down into the mud because it's all been chewed up with the backhoe to make us drive through it. The roll bar sunk down into that mud, and he had a helmet line placed to breathe air as he tilted his head up, and could just barely breathe. He coughed a lot of mud. Well,
Holy shit.
we got a hold of him with a backhoe and tipped him back over. They were going to try and roll him over. And then luckily, one of the guys that had helped him work on the rig was right there at the side. I was standing there 5 feet from it, and I'm like, we got to get a rope over here. We got to get this thing rolled over because this guy's going to drown in a second. And they just put on some doors. He knew how the doors were made, and he pulled the pins on the doors and got him drug out the side. But he was coughing mud. So
That sucks.
Yeah. That's definitely a fear of mine with wheeling is water and flipping into it. Fuck that. But
at least we go doing what we know.
Yes. Amen to that, right?
I like my rocks, and we're good with those.
So we are coming up on our 2-hour mark. That is our usual kind of start wrapping things up time frame. Okay. So we got some, a few different little things that we like to go through. One of them is for the listeners. If you had to give your opinion on your favorite DOT off-road tire and the worst DOT off-road tire, what would they be?
DOT off-road tire. What size are we talking?
Any
Doesn't
size.
matter. Any size. Just has to be. It cannot be a sticky or race tire.
God, I tell you what, because we groove everything. I don't have a fair. If off the shelf, I think you gotta love the Swamper, the Swampers.
Okay.
I mean, they just work.
Yep.
They
Okay.
work. And are we talking mud or rocks?
General.
Yeah, in general.
In your experience, I think is more how it's geared, right? If
Yes.
what tire has been
I
your
didn't mean
favorite
it's
to
horrible. I
run?
meant was the IROC, not the IROC.
Is the best or the worst?
That's one of the best because I do
Okay.
snow wheeling.
For snow wheeling, I can see
They
an
don't have the
IROC.
greatest sidewall.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're going to do rocks, then any old ball tire works. I was sorry, I don't have I haven't found a tire I liked yet. I like my Mickey Thompsons, but I cut and grooved them all well. For snow wheeling, that's the best tire I've ever had. And, we're talking 50 years experience now.
Mhm.
I mean, it tracks though. They're big. They've got the angular grooves in there. Then you actually groove them. I could see them moving some snow.
Oh yeah. And the wider the better. I had a guy that actually went from 40 inches back to 38-inch tall tires because he could get a 1538. And in a 40, all you can get is a 1250. And I like, why is that? And he said, okay, so you got 15-inch tread face times 4 tires is 60-inch. Imagine you have a 60-inch wide tire propelling you up a hill. Okay. Now the 40s, they're 12-inch wide tread face. That means you have a 48-inch wide tire propelling you up a hill. Well, what's going to do better? The 60-inch wide one or the 48? You're missing a whole tire.
Yeah.
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 And I'm on 46s trying to keep up with him on 38s. And all I ever see is his taillights. So I cannot argue with his logic.
I mean, it works in the snow. I wouldn't want to run a 15 wide in the rocks unless it's like a really tall fucking tire like a SX.
Right. And there's all these the SX and all these crazy new things that come out in the last couple of years, and I'm still fine. Luckily, I've got 2 sets of the 46s, so they're so far past their date code. I mean, I'm still running 15-inch rims, guys.
They work though, so
Yep.
who cares?
That's right.
And you're not trying to run them in competition rock crawling. You're doing something totally different where ballooning them out makes perfect sense.
Yep.
So if somebody was looking to get into like starting their own off-road shop, what is one piece of advice that you could give them?
Get a big motherfucking loan. Because you have to be able to buy at a discount.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you can't buy at a discount, you're not going to be able to compete with Amazon pricing. All right.
Good point.
And I had an off-road shop in Spokane, and what put me out of business was we were doing really, really good. You ever heard of 4-Wheel Parts?
Yep.
Those were one of our major distributors. Now we bought from Competition Specialties. We bought direct on anything that you buy from Summit. We could buy from Competition Specialties at roughly a 30% discount, and you can make money selling at that.
Mm-hmm.
And we also bought from 4-Wheel Parts, and they saw the Spokane market was good, and they put a retail store.
Bastards.
Jeez.
And I never had the equity to be able to compete and really buy. I could buy. There's different levels you buy at. The more you buy, the cheaper you buy. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so you need a big fucking loan so that you have to do a big buy-in to get your parts and your equipment. And then you have to keep a certain minimum sales volume going to keep that discount. And it's nasty.
Yep.
It's nasty. So I'd had a place, I had smoking rods in Spokane, and I don't remember how many thousands of dollars we spent each month on rent. When I started this place I have now, it's my backyard, and I could have got an $80,000 loan to start, and I didn't ever want to have to repay that. I got about a $30,000 loan, and I turned a 2-bay shop into an 8-bay shop with an office. And I did all the work myself. I spent 2 or 3 years building and expanding and wearing myself out. And at the end of that, I didn't have any capital. If I'd have got the $80,000 loan in the first place, now this is many years ago, the building would have been built in 2 months or maybe 4 instead of 6 years.
Nope.
Okay. And I could have filled it up with parts and accessories so it looked like a real place instead of some hole in the wall. It looked professional. And I might have done better. On the other hand, back in 08, when the shit hit the fan, with the housing market and jobs and the recession and all that, and I went from 6 guys working for me to myself.
Wow.
I didn't have any monthly bills. But knowing how basic accounting works, if you're going to have a business, it takes money to make money. And a guy I still don't even follow his advice, but I think about it, and this is good with the internet now. A guy who had been a millionaire and then lost it all back and forth 7 times. Somebody asked him one time, if you had $1, how would you spend it? He said he would spend 75% on advertising. So
I mean,
75.
it makes perfect sense. It's definitely
I've been
Sorry, go
I've been selling my Jana kits now for 14 years. And I know that ARB probably sells 60 to 80 Dana 60 lockers a month. Okay. I don't sell anywhere near that in my kits. And a lot of that stuff is going on pavement pounders and whatnot, but there is it seems to me that half of those should be at least Dana 70s instead with my kits. And I'm not selling a kit every day. That's my goal. And so I'm glad you guys called me up, because so many people, they spend the money, they get a locker, they get a ring and pinion, they get a bearing kit, and they put that in their front housing. And then they put on some stickies, 43s, or, they dual transfer case.
DD.
And they break some shit. And would you want to spend $2,500 twice or $2,500 once?
Once.
Great point. Yeah.
And literally I've got hundreds now of rock crawlers that have called me up and like, I broke 3 ring and pinions this year. Or last year or whatever. My friends tell me, we need your shit. So I set them up, and then 3 years later they go, RCV's getting tired of warrantying my axles. This 4th set's the last set you get. By the way, your ring and pinion's still holding up fine. That's the difference it makes. All right.
So it's funny.
That's an advertising point right there. It'll outlast your RCVs.
Yes, and if you got 40 spline, you're on your own, buddy. Okay, another ballpark.
Yep.
On the other hand, if you got 40 spline axles, I know you're going to break a ring and pinion. With the 76, you got a hell of a fighting chance. And if you got 800 horsepower in your rock bouncer, build Dana 80s front and rear or something, you know. But if you're a typical wheeling guy, I got the stuff that you won't go broke. You don't have to spend $10,000 building or $12,000 building a 14-bolt front end. The 76 will handle it just fine.
The thing I think is super cool about that kit is it lets you go to the junkyard and grab a Dana 60 rear out of one of the Ford vans and build a beefy motherfucking axle with a super smooth bottom that doesn't need shaving and will just
Absolutely.
kind of glide over rocks compared to my Sterling, Graham's Sterling, Richie and Cody. You guys are SOL because you don't have tons yet, but when you get there.
Wait. Well,
Yes.
I don't have them. I have them. They're just not in my Jeep.
No,
right?
actually, I
Sorry.
have them technically.
Don't forget, you got to, you know, you got a Dana 44, you got a trail rig, you know, you want to run some 35s, 38s, maybe even 40s. You're not into crazy big horsepower. You take that 8.5-inch Dana 40 ring gear and we put the 9-inch Dana 50 in there, or the 8.9-inch JK, the late model ring gears. That's a 40% increase in strength.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yes, they redesigned the pinion. They not only made it larger in diameter, but they made the teeth long. They left the same ID and they gained a 1/2 inch on the OD. So that makes each tooth is a 1/4 inch longer. So that's a 25% stress reduction right there.
Yep.
And
It's
that's why
insane.
they complained 40% increase when we put the JK ring and pinions in.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing we didn't get to that I'd like to is we talked about how the ring gear does the ski jump.
Mhm.
Okay. I built the machine. I've got a video. If you look at Jantz forward and reverse load bolt directions, I got a video. We'll show you how much that ski jump is. Now, if you're pushing on that ring gear on the drive side, you know, this is drive, this is coast, right?
Yep.
Drive side, if you go to the maximum momentary input torque rated on your differential, and you get the same relative numbers whether it's a 44 or a 60 or 70, okay? And you go to maximum momentary input torque, if you put a dial indicator on the back of your ring gear, you'll see the back end of that thing. When the force goes to it, and with the dial indicator here, that ring gear will move about 0.03 of an inch. That's on the drive side. Okay, so drive side, 0.03 of an inch deflection.
Mhm.
That's about 2,000 foot-pounds if you're got a Dana's 70. That's 2,000 foot-pounds input torque.
Mhm.
When you go to the 38-degree angle, which is your coast side, what do you think that deflection is now?
Pushing 7, maybe 10,
15. 20?
25.
30?
Wow.
30,000. And you watch the video and you'll see it.
Wow.
It's like, why do we bother setting up a ring and pinion pattern in the front end? And we go past the momentary maximum output torques, obviously.
Yep.
Those gears are spreading 30 thousandths apart. So I build a unit called a load bolt. And what you've got is a hard face bolt, and it catches the backside of the ring gear. Okay. So when you put the torque to it, you leave it with a couple thousandths clearance. And you put the torque to it, it just coasts around on that. And that will double the strength of a low pinion gear in your front end.
Holy shit.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Literally double the strength. I mean, they'd last forever because if it's not spreading apart, it can't go anywhere. It can't ride off the tip of your tooth and break it.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is a 44 carrier with a 50 ring gear on it. You can see that extra step there.
Yep.
So then your load bolt rides in that step.
Okay.
And I've got a little jig and fixture system. Let's see if I got this works. Is that gonna work? It might work. My finger there.
Yep.
Yeah.
You got a hole right there in the side. The load bolt comes through the side of the case. You just drill it in there with one of them 7/8 Christmas tree drills, right? And you can lay it out and miss it by 1/8 of an inch. It wouldn't matter. Because I've got a little jig. You see this little curve right here?
Yeah.
That matches the curve where your ring gear goes. So you bolt that. I don't trying to do this one-handed. It ain't coming out great. You bolt that onto this bushing here that's threaded for the load bolt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in your housing and bolted. You can see it's, I'm going to exaggerate. I'll stick it through there a way so you can see a little better. As
Yep.
far as I go. So it gets in there and it's bolted solid. Then you weld it and it welds right to the rib on the other side of the housing. And then you adjust it with a few thousandths clearance. And now that ring gear cannot ski jump away from the pinion. And that will double the strength of a 44 or a 60. I sell them for 60s. I sell them for 14 bolts. I sell them for the 9 inches. I've got them for Toyotas. I've even got them for Dana 30s, but I've only sold a couple.
Wow. That's
But
cool.
if the ring gear can't get away, you got it. And then, have you seen my J-flaters?
I don't know what that is.
All
No.
right. Well,
Hit us with it. What is it?
that might just look like your normal valve stem right there and a
Uh-huh.
cap. Okay. Well, that cap actually has its own valve stem inside of it. Let's see if we can get that. I don't know if it'll focus or not, but that's a cutaway. Boy, it's not really focusing.
It almost had it.
Almost had it. Dang
Put
it.
your other hand behind it so like it kind of blocks your face.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it almost had it.
Now it's just
Nah.
going for the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need it further away.
Kind of. It's
We can
No,
see the
don't worry.
cutaway, but there's
All
little
right.
details.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. You can see all this if you go to J-Platers on Amazon. So basically, you pull your valve core out, and if you want to air up, you just hook onto that sucker. Come on. Bam. You can air up right through it.
Yep.
Here's the fun part. When it comes time to air down,
Just spin them right off.
you don't take it off. You just give it a couple turns.
Hmm.
Okay. So there's not much pressure in that balloon.
Mhm.
So we'll just go to a little mini tire here. You want to know how much pressure's in your tire? Oh, there you go. It's got 30 pounds in it.
I like that. That's super
You wanna
cool
go
and super
four-wheeling?
simple.
To figure out your timing. Bam. Now we got 5 pounds. We're ready to go.
Wow.
So like on a set of 40s will take you can do a set of 40s in about 2 minutes. Does it? They take about 40 seconds to air down from 30 to 14. Okay.
Mhm.
So, you know what? I might be pulling a Biden here on my numbers, but we'll reality. Let me go to my 35s on my rodeo because I remember that one right on the money. 35-inch tires, they take about 48 seconds to go from 32 down to 14, and they take about the same amount of time to go from 14 down to 4. Okay.
Huh.
So you're driving down the road, the time to turn the hubs in, you're hitting the washboard and the gravel and the trail, but you're not in the hard stuff yet. You walk outside, you crank that first cap, you give it about 2 twists, and then you count to 10, or you count to 12. And now you're on the second tire. You give it 2 twists. And you count to 12 and you're on the third tire, you give it 2 twists. And you go back to the first tire after you count at 12. You see where we're going here?
Yeah.
Mhm.
now got its 48 seconds on it. So you walk around the rig twice, 96 seconds, you've taken your 35s down to 14. Now you're getting some mud and shitty, slimy stuff, and you want a little more. Do the same
got
thing
it.
again. Now you're down to about 6. So you got to figure your timing out. And it's all in the little instructions. I sell them on Amazon. And where the hell did that go now? I had it all ready here, simple and ready, and I probably knocked it on the floor. I'll grab another one.
If you want, send us a
Picture?
link to that, and we will drop that in the description.
I have it right
Okay.
here.
I'll
Already
send
have
it.
it.
You already found it.
Yeah, I have a
Yep.
link.
Awesome.
Played by the Super Jeep guy. So it's funny because we go on trips where you go up and down in elevation a lot. You got to airback them up again. We get the end of a trail. Now I got to drive 30 miles to loop back around. You don't have to do shit. Just hook back up and up they go.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yep.
I like that setup a lot.
I've got a video. I thought it was loaded up on Amazon. I got to get my geek to do it. But I actually stand in the backyard and I got 440s and I go around and air them all down. And there's actually no Jeep there. It works out pretty good.
That's awesome. All right, so now my next question would be, what's next? You got all these cool different ideas. You went from like the gear swaps, if you will, to now the J-flaters. What's kind of next picking in your mind? I mean, you don't have to obviously go into it too crazy, but is there anything else that you're looking at wanting to get into?
Yeah, I've had some ideas of making some
Almost done.
lockout hubs that actually have clutches in them that you can pre-adjust so you'd never break an axle. But I don't know if people want to spend $1,200 for a pair of hubs.
That's a little
But
steep.
I actually built a set literally about 8 or 9 years ago. And I could drive down a hill in the backyard, wedge a tire into the tree because the tree's going up, the hill's going down. Wedge your tire right here, and the whole rig would buck up and down, and these things would break loose.
Huh.
And then you just keep on wheeling. I've drag raced them, I've mud bogged them.
Wow.
That's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
The problem is most people don't even run hubs anymore. If you're going to add an extra $1,200 to your build, go with 40 spline axles. But that was one of my other ideas. But what I'm really working on, what's next, is the gnarly nitro.
What is a gnarly nitro?
So a nitro is a Dodge sub built on a Liberty chassis. They made them from 07 to 12. They didn't even bother to come with a low range. But they got that same 6-bolt pattern that all the modern transfer cases have.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got it with the towing option, it came with a 5-speed NAG1 Mercedes transmission. And that just happens to have the right output spline to put a JK 4-to-1 transfer case behind it.
Oh shit.
Yes. And although they have some rather fake large fender flares on them, the radius of that fender flare is 20 inches.
That'll fit a 40 just fine.
Well, we're going with 38s. You got to have a little wiggle room for steering. But I always try and find a set of words that you can Google and you'll find them and you won't find anything else. So if you Google gnarly nitro, you'll find it on the nitro forums. And unfortunately, I had to have a shoulder replaced 2 years ago, and that's where I left off on it. But I've got fender wells I took out of an E350 van and put in the back so I could fit. And they kind of have some of the same body lines of an old, 42 Dodge Power Wagon, War Wagon.
That's
And
kind of cool because those were such a throwaway car.
Right. Now, if you remember, they had a big ass fenders on them and kind of a narrowed hood and then a running board that goes all the way to the back. So that's what I'm building. I'll have 38s on a sub. I've managed to collect the 44 rear end, some 35 spline axles, and I'm going to build a 50 IFS front end for it. I'm getting old. I like the smooth ride.
Yeah.
And the
Yep.
back seats, they fold down flat from the tailgate all the way to the front seats. So you can stick a nice bed in there, and I'll have my own overlanding machine. I'll take it on a trail, a 4-rated trail. I'm not going to get it on a 5 trail or a buggy for sure. But I got one more tricky build in me, and then talk about long range goals.
That's awesome.
That's a really cool.
And
I had to
It-
It
Google
looks
that.
cool.
did you find it? There
I
you
Yeah.
go.
found it.
Yeah.
You guys will have fun with that. I've got a couple good videos on it and the basic start of it. When I turn 82 years old, I'm 60, going on 65 now. Jeep will be 100 years old.
Wow.
Now I know that the 75th year anniversary of the Jeep had some pretty big parties, back around Toledo, Ohio, and where Jeeps were made and Bantam started and all that. I will be 82 years old. My Jeep will be 99 years old. I'm going to take the Nitro, I'm going to put the Jeep on a trailer, and I'm going to get them both to that party. That's my goal.
Yeah.
That sounds sick.
Yeah,
So-
baby.
Go ahead. Sorry. Okay, so for somebody who wants to like continue this style of thing, right? We're not all gonna last forever. Wheeling will hopefully last for another 100 more years, right?
Right?
The 12-year-old kid that may come across this episode and absolutely love the ingenuity that you brought into this sport and the uniqueness with all the different things you did. If they were trying to decide between schooling or experience, what would you tell them? What would you push them to go towards more?
You got to have both.
All right.
Okay? If you got the grades to be an engineer, there's a lot of engineers in this sport. Be an engineer. But, you got to have hands-on experience. I worked for farmers. I worked for local machine shops. I did maintenance for things. You got to tinker, and there's nothing like experience. So, you buy somebody's half-built Cherokee and learn how to maintain it and work on it. And you got to have math. But not everybody's made for college. So, hit a trade school. You get into maintenance, something like that. There's really good jobs in being an electrician or a maintenance guy or something.
Hi.
And
Tool and die maker here.
yep, well, die maker, there you go. And it's if you got the bug, you got the bug. I've given a few people the bug that weren't into them, and it's led to some amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, experience versus school, both.
Hell yeah. I think that's a perfect answer too.
I worked for farmers during the summer. I learned more working for farmers almost than I did in engineering for practical application. I mean, I saw the wheels fall off and the lug nuts come loose and the bearings go bad and the axles bend and the hydraulics leak, and the electrical shit fry. And then you get into engineering and you get the fella whose daddy sent him from England to America to go to college and learn engineering. He could say, Carl, I can calculate the diameter of a shaft, take a certain amount of torque. I can calculate the amount of horsepower and the gearing necessary to turn that shaft at a certain RPM with a certain wheel on it. And I can calculate the size of the keyway that needs to be cut into that shaft and the length and size, so that will shear when it hits too much torque on it. But it will carry the load it needs to carry when it's in use. But Carl, I don't know what one looks like. So I took him out to my Bronco. I showed him the PTO drive off the side of my truck 4-speed. I showed him the shaft going up to the winch. And I showed him the U-joints on it. And I showed him the keyway is on it. And I showed him the shear pins on it. And he got some hands-on experience.
Hell yeah.
And I got all that from working for farmers.
I love that. I mean, honestly, that's like the perfect answer too. And I feel like experience can kind of push you towards the proper side of education, right? Because once, like, let's say he was in like your shoes prior, or you were in the shoes of the farmers, and kind of going through it and recognizing that you're in a spot that you don't know. So then you can at least go and find the proper education to get you to that spot. So honestly, your answer was perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for.
You volunteer for Habit for Humanity, and you help build a house. Somebody will show you how to drive a nail and put up some drywall or some 2x4s or put some roofing on. It's all part of the game. It's all part of picking up knowledge.
I love
Makes
that.
sense to me.
But go ahead, Luke. Go.
The only thing I'm going to add
riding
on.
a bicycle around town, and we didn't have the internet. If you want to learn, I mean, there's so much on YouTube now. It's phenomenal. I used to ride around town, and I would look for guys working on a rig in their garage, and I'd just walk up and say hi. Somehow I never got, taken behind the woodshed because I was pretty young, But, I think a person can still do that. You'd see somebody working on an alley, working on a rig in a garage in an alleyway or whatever. I just walk in and say hi.
I think it's really cool with the internet too, because now the internet actually, as weird as this is to say, provides an opportunity for you to see someone is local and be like, hey, can I come take a look at this thing? I want to see how it actually works.
Well, that's fantastic.
I mean, a fantastic example of that is RJ. We'll go back to you, Luke. Sorry, I just wanted to kind of throw this in. Was RJ was just like, he loved his RSDs. He had an XJ, but he never really got into wheeling. And then he just saw Buckley's Jeep driving around and like just found his Instagram and was just like, hey, we should hang out sometime. And now he's just fully devolved into this level of autism with the rest of us.
He just picked up his Dana 60.
I got the
last
text
weekend
about that.
He borrowed my engine crane to get it out of the back of his dad's truck. He's on a completely different trajectory, and the only thing that changed is now he's talking to people who are doing the same thing.
I love it. I'm so excited for him, and it is literally just power of the internet. Granted, like he was seeing him around, so he could have stopped at the gas station, talked to him, but still. But go ahead.
Same difference,
Sorry,
Times are different now. Everybody's so litigation and sue happy and worried about this or that happening. But if you can find it doesn't have to be a 4-wheel drive shop. You can still find a locally owned business, a car auto shop or something. Tell a guy you'll volunteer to fucking sweep the floor if you can help and learn. I've had I've mentored a lot of people. When I worked for Boeing, I spent some time working for Boeing. I had to take a 6-week pre-employment class and pay for it myself. Okay. So every time I've had a new hire come into my shop when I had employees, I'm semi-retired now. Like I said, I used to have 6, 7 guys working for me. They had to work for me for 2 weeks. I gave them gas money and lunch money. But 2 weeks working and then I got to see if they could understand what they're doing. And if I came outside and they were leaning on the car with the flat tire that they should have put air in 20 minutes ago, thumb fucking a cell phone, they're out of there.
Yeah.
So I would say if you go somewhere to learn, leave your cell phone in the car.
Yep.
I think it's That's a really, really double-edged sword, though, because it's so nice, being the tool and die maker that I am, to sit down and record something running how it should be, so you can see the difference and invert that when it's acting up, and compare those two videos.
But you're also
put that cell phone in your pocket and turn all the notices off.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'll agree with that one.
there you go. Yep.
When you got new guys going in that are supposed to be learning and absorbing shit, and you have to wait for them to get off the phone to explain something, it's fucking infuriating.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That shouldn't be a thing.
That's
But-
why I just make them do the work. I stand back, tell them what they need to do. Like, I mean, I experience this all the time. Like, we had some really new guys come into work, and like one of the biggest things was like swapping out, as simple as it was, swapping out a light switch. And he was like, all right, so what do I do? And I'm like, well, what do you think you need to do? And like, kind of like I would talk him through it, and I wouldn't just show him, because, it's not everybody learns that way. And I mean, shit, they can't be on their phone if their hands are halfway between getting electrocuted and cutting them off with the snips. So it's kind of, everybody's got their own style, but I definitely agree, at learning, keep the phone away from it. But like once you're already experienced, then you can kind of, if you need to, add the phone into the process if it helps. So.
Oh yeah, especially that before picture when it's all together. Because 2 weeks later, you got to remember how it went all together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I do it all the time at work.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're starting to run a little long. I'd like to just give our quick shout out to Crawler Off-Road. BCOP gets you 10% off your recovery gear. So check them out. And Carl, give us a quick one-liner piece of dad advice.
It's dad advice. Oh my goodness, I thought I just did that. Volunteer.
Okay. If that's
Perfect.
going,
That's
that's dad advice.
Dad advice. Wow, I didn't even think of that. Listen, I talk too much. You got to listen.
And there you have it, folks. Take some time and listen. This episode was really light on us talking because we were all just sitting here listening and learning.
Dude, I learned so fucking much. Genuinely. Like, I'm a yapper. I don't shut up ever. Graham can attest to it. Luke can attest to it. Richie can attest to it. 99% of this episode, I was just staring at my screen, enjoying every fucking second of the history lesson to the adventure stories. I mean, genuinely, this was one of my favorite episodes.
I enjoyed the diff
Get a bigger
conversation.
hat now.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when I asked Luke who the guest was, and he said Carl Jantz, I was like, wait a minute. The Jantz guy, him?
Yes.
I was like, how the hell did you get him?
Oddly enough, he popped up in my Facebook recommended, and I'm like, Jantz Engineering? No fuck. Oh, hey, it's in his bio. Cool. I'm gonna message this dude. And then we were supposed to have someone else on, and they text me that they're out wheeling with their family, and I was like, I wonder if Carl's free. So I hit you up, and here we are.
Now, this is the perfect day for it. Because yesterday, I glued my second set of 47s or 46s onto my 12 wide wheels, and to glue them and mount them up and flip them back and forth and glue them to the rim so they won't come off. I got 3 of them done. Like, I had help, but I didn't move all last night, and I just got back from the chiropractor. I have done nothing, so it was a good day to just sit. My back is so wore out from yesterday. I could hardly walk. So your timing was perfect.